Chat, how y'all doing? It has been a few days. Welcome back. Welcome in. We're catching a quick trial that just kind of came across my desk. Some of you guys hit up our e-forum this morning asking for us to cover it. So we are here doing that. There's a lot going on. Tomorrow we have the Fonnie Willis hearing. That's scheduled for 10 a.m. So we're going to be on that one. And then Thursday we have Courtney Clenny, one of her final pretrial hearings. So it's going to be a crazy, crazy week. And then I am thinking about jumping back in on YNW Melly, picking it up on day 3 of his first trial. We'll do a rewatch because we have a date of January 21st for his other witness tampering thing. Is there so much going on? 50 Cent is beefing with some of these podcast guys, Jimmy, Fabulous, everybody, all types of craziness. Now, also, Brian Walsh, his case just came to a close. There's so much going on. I cannot believe that it is the end of the year and there's all of this that's happening. So what we're going to do with this case, if you have not heard of it, this is California versus Maya Hernandez. It's pretty sad. I try to stay out of it when it comes to children. But this is a young woman who had 2 kids, and she left them in a hot car while she was at a cosmetic place. And you know what she was doing? She's getting a goddamn BBL, okay? A BBL. At first, people thought it was lip injections. But I'm like, okay, I don't think lip injections take that long. That's probably less than an hour of an appointment. But she had left her kids in the car for a ridiculously long time. And unfortunately, one of those children passed away. So that's what this case is. It's going to be quick. They did not televise all of it. They did opening statements, but I am going to jump in on closing statements. And of course, I'll keep y'all updated on the Alicia Andrews situation as well. Got my trusty makeup brushes here because y'all know I apply as we watch now. So that's really what is happening. So shout out to everybody that's in the chat. Hit the like button as you come on in. Let me get us all set up so we can jump into the closing arguments. They're calling it's incorrectly named the cosmetic filler mom. It's a BBL. Y'all know that. It is a straight up BBL. So this is in California. All right. So this is a little bit farther on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. So it's 1:33. I think that they were on lunch. And when I checked in, we only saw the prosecutor delivering her closing argument. So why don't we catch up with them? I'm going to put the audio booster on. Also going to do it at 1.25 speed because after we hear from the defense, we're going to be on verdict watch. I know it's pretty peculiar, but they did not allow cameras in the courtroom aside from opening arguments and closing. Sometimes that happens. Oh, the other thing that is scheduled for tomorrow too, this is my plan B in case Fonnie doesn't show up because she does that sometimes. She's supposed to show up, but the plan B for tomorrow, remember that crazy case we had done on like a Sunday? The I'm a PhD case?
I'm a PhD.
Yeah, she's getting sentenced tomorrow too. So is Brian Walsh. So those two are going to be the backups in case Fonnie Willis does not show up. But I have this on 1.25 speed. Let's hear closing arguments in the BBL mom trial. Let's go.
2.5 hours where she, as I said in the beginning.
Let's come back a little bit. This is the prosecutor starting her closing. It was a little abrupt, a little loud as well. I gotta turn that down. She is loud. The prosecutor is expecting. So imagine that. You know, young child loses his life and the prosecutor.
It's time for closing arguments. As you know, we always start first with the prosecutor, Mr. Coney.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, here we go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As I said in the beginning of trial, and you now know, this case is called the People versus Maya Hernandez. But we are here because of 2 babies. We are here because of 1-year-old Amillio and 2-year-old Mateo. We are here because on June 29th, 2025, the defendant, the biological mother of Amillio and Mateo, chose herself.
She chose
She chose
BBL.
herself at the expense of her children. She chose herself at the expense of Amillio's life. We are here because on June 29th, 2025, the defendant chose her looks. She chose to make an appointment in Bakersfield, a cosmetic procedure. In her words, a procedure to make her feel more beautiful. That choice, ladies and gentlemen, the choice for her to feel more beautiful, to focus on herself, to focus on her looks, killed Amillio. On that day, she chose the appointment in Bakersfield. She chose to drive from Visalia to Bakersfield with her 2 children. She chose not to get a babysitter, knowing she had options. She chose to bring them to Bakersfield, knowing that she would be permitted to bring the kids into the building and they could wait in the waiting room. But what choice did she make, ladies and gentlemen, when she got to Bakersfield? She chose to leave them in the car. She didn't choose to leave them in the car while she ran inside to get milk. She didn't choose to leave them in the car while she ran to the mailbox. She chose to leave them in the car for 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours where she did not check on them one single time. And ladies and gentlemen, what was happening to Amillio while the defendant was sitting inside the building, while she was chatting with other adults, while she was socializing, while she was in a cool atmosphere? What was happening to Amillio when his mother, the one person who was supposed to protect him, the one person who was supposed to put him above all else, what was happening to Amillio as she sat in the building and ignored her responsibilities? He was burning from the inside out. His body was rising to temperatures that are not compatible with life. You heard that quotation from Dr. Thomas Riley.
Dang.
His body temperatures were not compatible with life. While his mother sat inside, socializing, laughing, chatting, sharing stories about cosmetic procedures, talking about her plans, talking about how hot it was outside. Amillio was perishing in the car while Mateo sat there and watched. Ladies and gentlemen, as adults, we are all entitled to make choices. We get to choose what we do on a daily basis. That's part of being an adult. But the other side to that coin is, as an adult, when you make a choice and that's a bad choice, you have to be held accountable. The defendant in this case on June 29th, 2025, made many, many, many bad choices. All of those choices benefited her at the peril of her children. It is now time for her to be held accountable for those choices. It is time for her to be accountable for leaving her 2 babies in the car, knowing it was dangerous and knowing it was irresponsible. And ladies and gentlemen, you as the jury now get to look at the defendant and tell her that her choices were wrong, that putting her vanity, her looks, her desire to feel beautiful above her children was wrong. Not only was it wrong, but it was criminal. Not only was it wrong and criminal, but she did it knowing it was dangerous, knowing it was wrong, knowing it could harm. And ladies and gentlemen, you are going to convey that message to the defendant. You are going to tell her it's time for her to be held accountable. You're going to tell her what she did was wrong by finding her guilty of the murder of Amillio and the child abuse likely to cause great bodily injury of Mateo. That is the opportunity you are going to get to have at the end of this case, after I speak with you, after Mr. Wakeman speaks with you. But in order for you to make those findings, you need to know the law. You need to know the law and how that law connects with the evidence. So I want to take some time this morning and I want to go through the evidence you have in this case. I'm going to connect that to the law in this case. And at the end of my argument, I will explain to you why the evidence, when mixed with the law, when compared to the law, is going to be sufficient for you to find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I want to apologize ahead of time. You might have to hear me talking for quite a while this morning.
Oh, no.
There's going to be a lot I have to say.
Oh, no.
You might find what I'm saying to be boring at times.
Oh, no.
You might find what I'm saying or what I'm publishing to you to be redundant at times.
At least
and
she's
there will
keeping
be
it
some slides
above.
you will see multiple times.
She's telling the
But
truth.
ladies and gentlemen, as you now know, this is an important case. The evidence and the law is important. It is important that when you go into that jury deliberation room, you are fully equipped to make the appropriate decision. And I want to take some time this morning to make sure that you have the tools necessary to make the just verdict in this case. So first you have the information. Count 1, second-degree murder of Amillio. The lesser included, it shows as count 2. It is a lesser included offense. She cannot be found guilty of both. Involuntary manslaughter of Amillio. Count 3, child abuse of Amillio resulting in his death. And count 4, child abuse of Mateo. Second-degree murder of Amillio, count 1.
Oh
And I'm sure,
no.
ladies and gentlemen, you can imagine the
Hold
bulk
on.
of my discussion.
Cannot show.
I'm sure you have noticed throughout the evidence that this charge is why we are here today. We are here because Amillio died at the hands of his mother. We are here because she caused his death. She did it with conscious disregard for human life, and she knew the dangers to human life when she acted. The elements. And again, as I described in opening statements, there are 2 different ways in this case, not in every case, but in this case, there are 2 different ways to get to second-degree murder. First, second-degree murder, implied malice theory, commission of an act. The second way, which I will discuss in a moment, is second-degree murder, failure to act. First way, commission of an act. Second way, failure to act as a mother. Defendant committed an act that caused the death of Amillio. When the defendant acted, she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. Malice aforethought is defined for you in the instructions. In your instruction for this charge, instruction 520, there's going to be one single sentence that tells you what express malice is. That sentence can be ignored. This is not a case of express malice. I am not, and I will not argue to you this morning that the defendant had an intent to kill Amillio. We are here for implied malice. And implied malice means she intentionally committed the act. She intentionally left Amillio in the car. That's the act that satisfies the first element of implied malice. The natural and probable consequences of the act were dangerous to human life in that the act involved a high degree of probability that it would result in death. She left Amillio and Mateo in the car for 2.5 hours in the middle of a Bakersfield summer in extreme heats.
That's crazy.
At the time she acted, she knew the act was dangerous to human life. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that I anticipate most of what this case and today's arguments are going to rely on falls right here. At the time she acted, she knew the act was dangerous to human life. You know, based upon her interviews with Detective McNabb, based upon her actions, based upon her failures to tell anybody inside of the spa that she had her children with her.
You know what? I want to see what the defense's argument is going to be, because it's like at this point, and I rarely say this, throw her under the jail. You're going to leave your kids in in the car while you're inside getting a BBL. Bring them inside. Get a babysitter. A BBL was that important to you?
That she knew her acts were dangerous, that she knew they were dangerous to human life. She got in here and she testified and she told you a different story. I will spend some time going over which of those statements is going to get you where you need to go. And she deliberately acted with conscious disregard for human life. She knew what she was doing. She knew it was dangerous, and she did it anyway. She knew it was dangerous to leave the babies in the car, but she did it anyway. She did it anyway because that day, June 29th, 2025, was about Maya. It was about Maya's wants, Maya's needs. That day was never about Amillio. It was never about Mateo. And it was never about protecting the boys. Second-degree murder, failure to protect. This one, first element, the defendant had a legal duty to protect Amillio, and the defendant failed to perform that duty, and that failure caused the death of Amillio. You will see in the instruction for this crime that a mother has a legal duty to protect. You don't have to guess on that. You don't have to speculate. That is the law. You know that the defendant in this case is the biological mother of both Amillio and Mateo. You know that it was her duty to protect as a mother, and she failed to do so. She gave you this element when she testified. She said she knows she failed to protect them. She failed to protect them because she should have brought them in with her. She should have left them with a babysitter. She should have done absolutely anything, ladies and gentlemen, other than leaving them in a car to burn and perish.
Oh my God.
When the defendant failed to act, she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. Implied malice, again, ladies and gentlemen, the same requirements for both ways to get to second-degree murder. The only thing that changes is the act versus the failure to act and the failure to perform her duty as a mother. We often hear the term malice. And in ordinary language, that sounds like a bad word. Like that sounds like we have to have hatred, ill will. No, ladies and gentlemen, not in this courtroom, not in the law. The law will specifically tell you when you're looking at Calcrim 520, malice aforethought does not require hatred or ill will towards the victim. The defendant did not have to be mad at Amillio. The defendant did not have to hate Amillio. It's okay that you saw those photographs of the defendant showing affection and loving Amillio. None of that negates the elements of second-degree murder. Nothing that you saw in those photographs negates implied malice. It's okay that she wasn't upset with Amillio. It's okay that she didn't hate him. It's okay that she did not intentionally kill him. Because none of that is required for second-degree murder, ladies and gentlemen. Now that you know the charges and the law that apply to those charges, how does that intertwine with your duties, with your job as the jury, ladies and gentlemen? It is now your job to decide what happened that day. It is your job to decide what was the defendant thinking that day. What did she know before she got out of the car? It's your job to decide that. And you decide that by taking all of the evidence you have heard, the witness statements, the testimony, the photos, the defendant's recorded interview, text messages to the nurse. You get to take all of that and you decide what happened that day. You decide what was she thinking that day.
Oh, court of public opinion. This is bad. You were texting the nurse inside of the clinic from inside of the car where you left your children in the hot summer's day in Bakersfield, California. I think it was like 99 degrees or somewhere around 100 degrees. Like this lady, all to get a BBL.
You apply that to the law. And once you do that, you come to a conclusion. And that is your job, ladies and gentlemen, as the jury. We told you during voir dire that you can't come in with special knowledge. You can't come in with your own medical opinion as to what happened. You can't come in with any preconceived notions about what happened.
Right, Ebony. What was her plan? Shorty, what was your plan? And look, we got another neck tattoo, so y'all know what time it is. But it's like, what was your plan? If you got a BBL and they put fluid or whatever in your ass, like, how are you going to sit and drive? And that's even worse because you were going to drive these kids home after getting a BBL. Don't they leak?
You can't come in with, oh, the media said this, I'm going to believe A, B, or C. But the one thing we never asked you to leave outside was your common sense. And that's because your common sense is of utmost importance in your deliberations, in your deciding what happened in this case. Do not leave your common sense in this courtroom when you go into the jury deliberation room. Take it with you and use it. How did we get here today, ladies and gentlemen? As I previously described, the defendant made an appointment to drive from Visalia to Bakersfield to receive a cosmetic procedure. Now, when she initially testified on direct, she attempted to make it sound like this was a last-minute sort of thing, that she had to come and there wasn't really much time for planning. But you learned on cross-examination that that was not the case, that she knew about this appointment for at least days ahead of time, and that she had been attempting to schedule this appointment since early May. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, you know that this was not a mandatory procedure. This was not a procedure that she needed for her health or well-being. This was an elective cosmetic procedure for the sole purpose of enhancing her looks and helping to make her feel beautiful. So any statements that I didn't have enough time to decide what I was going to do with him or find a babysitter, those go out the window.
Shame. What does it say? Background. Defendant made an appointment to drive from wherever to Bakersfield to receive a BBL. Defendant traveled to Bakersfield with her two sons, Amillio and Mateo. Amillio was just 1 year old and Mateo was 2. Prior to leaving Visalia, the defendant asked the nurse providing the treatment if she could bring her kids inside with her. The nurse told her she could bring her kids inside with her. The defendant arrived at the med spa in Bakersfield. She waited in the car for a short period of time before going into the med spa. Defendant ultimately left her car at 2:04 p.m. and went inside of the med spa. She did not bring her babies inside with her. Defendant was inside of the med spa until 4:33 p.m. That means she was in there for over 2 hours getting a BBL and left her kids in the car. Throw her under the jail. I rarely say it. I mean, just open and shut case.
Because this was all based around the choices she made. This was not an emergent situation. It was not a last minute situation. The defendant made the choice to drive to Bakersfield with the two boys, Amillio and Mateo. She knew before she left home that she could bring the boys inside the spa with her. They would simply have to wait in the waiting room. She knew that she had a stroller in her car that both of the boys could sit in, be strapped in, just like in their car seats, and sit in the spa. She chose none of that, ladies and gentlemen. She arrived in Bakersfield. She chose to go inside at approximately 2:04 p.m. And at that time, she chose to leave her children in the car. She sat inside that business in the same chair from 2:05 to 4:09 p.m. Did not move from the chair, ladies and gentlemen. You watched that. She didn't get up to check on her appointment time. She didn't get up to ask how much longer. She didn't get up to tell anybody she was in a hurry. She didn't get up to check on her kids. At 4:09, she goes back for her procedure. And at 4:33, she leaves the building. Even at this time, ladies and gentlemen, 4:33 p.m., she does not leave to go check on her kids. And you heard that through her interviews with detectives. She left to go get her phone to pay. Even when she left at 4:33, her children were not the priority. She did not leave to go get her children. She left to go get her money. Again, with Maya as the priority, not her children. After a 911 call is made at 4:40 p.m. on that day, officers are dispatched around 4:43 p.m. and arrive approximately 4:45 p.m. at the business that day. By the time officers arrive, this was Officer Velez Aguilar and Officer Fahel. All ambulance personnel are already on scene, providing treatment to Amillio. You saw the body-worn camera, ladies and gentlemen. You saw Amillio's lifeless body on the gurney. Amillio was ultimately transported to Adventist Hospital, where he was treated by Nurse Gabrielle Long and Dr. Thomas Riley. You heard from both of those witnesses. You heard that at the scene, officers also observed Mateo. Now, by the time officers saw Mateo, he was soaking wet, he was red. A lot of that water, that soaking wet, did in fact come from efforts of Harmony and Shelby to cool him down, putting water on him, pouring water on him. But you also heard from Shelby and Harmony that before they started putting water on Mateo, he looked like he was about to have a stroke. He was hot to the touch, and he was sweaty. You heard Ian Blue describe Mateo. He said, it's a term we use in Spanish. It means kind of like wet chicken. The way he looked with his hair wet and stuck to his face. Mateo was also transported to Adventist Health Hospital. Amillio arrived at the hospital about 5:00 p.m. He was ultimately pronounced deceased at 5:48 p.m. I apologize. You heard from Dr. Riley. They were as aggressive as possible in their attempts to save Amillio. They were as aggressive as possible in resuscitating him. They were as aggressive as possible in attempting to cool his body. They did cool his temperature from about 107 to 101, but that was not sufficient because it was too late.
Wait.
And you heard from Dr. Riley that early intervention.
As we all get fevers and we get sick, this poor thing, this little baby was left in that car. His temperature was 107 degrees. Throw her under the jail. Like, what is the defense going to even say?
Could have saved Amillio.
107.
The defendant going out to her car to check on Amillio could have and would have saved Amillio. You heard Dr. Riley talk about how heartbreaking it was to see a 12-month-old in the condition Amillio was in. That was gut-wrenching that he was unable to save Amillio on that day. He even said at one point, physicians are humans too. They don't put on a cloak and not have feelings. And he explained those feelings to you of seeing a 12-month-old boy come in completely lifeless. We'll talk more about his testimony in a few minutes. Mateo was transported to the hospital. While in the hospital, his temperature was approximately 99 degrees. He was fine and he was ultimately released. You heard Nurse Elizabeth Bond explain to you the difference, why Mateo was okay, but Amillio wasn't. And it was because of their age. Amillio was not yet able to regulate his inside temperature because of his age. Mateo had more developed sweat glands, which explains the sweat on the outside of his body when he was located. Video surveillance. The detectives had information. The defendant told them, I left him in the car for 2 hours. She was very forthcoming about that from the start, ladies and gentlemen. The detectives could have rested on that and been like, okay, she told us. They wanted to see what happened that day. They wanted to make sure this was a complete and thorough investigation, so they got the video surveillance from the business. In that video surveillance, you can see the defendant walking up to the business at about 2:04 p.m., ultimately takes the seat by not the west door, but the door cross, where she sits for the rest of the time until 4:09 p.m. At 4:09 p.m., you see the defendant get up and walk in the area that we have been told is the area of the rooms for service, room B6. You also saw that and can see that on the body-worn camera footage of Detective Barthelms conducting the measurements into the building. The defendant ultimately leaves the building for the first time at 4:33 p.m. You heard about the search of the defendant's vehicle. The infotainment screen was broken. They were not able to get any immediate information from the infotainment system about what specifically was happening in that car. There was a bottle found behind the passenger seat, right by where Amillio's seat was. And ladies and gentlemen, this might seem very minor, but it's not. You heard that the bottle found by Amillio's seat was 2/3 full. You also know that Amillio was strapped into his car seat. He could not get out. If he dropped that bottle while he was still okay, he had no liquids to drink. If he dropped that bottle after...
This lady's terrible. I mean, and here's the thing. This is a prosecutor who's expecting, right? You know, the little baby that passed was a year old. This woman is about to have a baby, okay? So there are very few moments where prosecutors actually do some justice, right? But this one is, and I do think that she's gonna talk to this jury for a bit about this, and then we're gonna hear from the defense team. Looks like the defense is up right now. Should be rather short. We won't be here for long, so I know this is a hard one, guys. I usually try to keep the kids out of it. I don't like to cover cases with kids. I really dislike it. But at the same time, this is something that's live right now. A few people asked me to cover it. Y'all know if you ask me, I will do my best. But luckily, this is a short one. We could have done the whole thing. You know, there's opening statements, but I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to go straight to, you know, justice being served for this young man, not even, 1 year old. Imagine that, So it's a tough one. We are going to stick around towards the end and talk about the other cases that we're working towards the end of the week. Tomorrow's a big day for Fonnie. Again, boots on the ground. I have a person that will be around, so we will see if she shows up. Word on the street is Fonnie is going to show up. So we will talk about that. So I know this is an unfortunate one, y'all, but we're going to get through it. I have it on 1.25 speed. Shouldn't be much longer. But again, these type of cases happen too. Like this is crime. For somebody to really focus on their body and get a BBL aside from being a mother. You just gave birth to this kid a year ago.
He had began to perish. He began to perish pretty quickly before he could even get halfway through his bottle. Neither of those scenarios is beneficial to Amillio. Both of those scenarios tell you that had the defendant gone out to check on them, she could have fixed the situation. You also heard that the defendant had a stroller in the trunk of her car. This also might have seemed like a fairly insignificant find when you heard the evidence. But you now know that it was not insignificant, ladies and gentlemen. This piece of evidence is not insignificant. This piece of evidence tells you that the defendant had the means to bring the kids inside with her.
Oh my
She
God.
had the means to literally put them the same way they were in the car.
That's so
Put
rad.
each of them in their seat, strap them with the harnesses that you saw in Defense Exhibit 10, hand them the phone and let them watch TV. Same exact condition they were left in the car. But in the stroller, they would have been inside, out of the elements, not subject to the heat, and we wouldn't be here today. But Amillio would. But the defendant chose not to use the stroller because that would have meant that she had to watch them and control them while inside the business, and that is not what she wanted to do on that day. You heard from witness Shelby Murch that she was a patron that day at the med spa. She was also waiting for her procedure. She was there approximately 30 minutes before the defendant arrived. She told you and she described for you the atmosphere in the waiting room. And you ultimately got to see the atmosphere, ladies and gentlemen, but Ms. Murch described it for you before you saw the video surveillance. And what you saw in that video surveillance perfectly matched what Ms. Murch told you. It was a friendly, welcoming, lively atmosphere. People were chatting. They were talking. There was another child. While the defendant was in the waiting room, she was bubbly and engaging in conversations with the other patrons. Bubbly and engaging in conversations with the other patrons. She told them that she had 2 little babies. She told them what her plans were for the 4th of July in a few days. What she didn't tell anybody inside of the waiting room was that her 2 little babies were actually there. What she didn't tell anybody in the waiting room was that her 2 little babies were strapped in her car.
Oh my God.
She testified, oh, I didn't tell them because they're strangers and I don't want to tell them about my life. But ladies and gentlemen, this is
No.
where you get to use your common sense.
No.
You know better. You know that's not why she withheld that information. She was talking to these people about getting things injected into her butt. She was talking to them about her plans. She was talking to them about the fact that she had
Can't
children.
make it up.
Oh, but the
Make it
fact
up.
that she had them with her was simply too personal.
You can't make
No, ladies and gentlemen. She knew that it was wrong and that it was criminal, and that if they knew, she would have a problem. That's why she didn't tell anybody her kids were with her in the car. After the defendant's procedure, the defendant left the building and went outside. Shortly after, a few minutes later, the defendant came in carrying Amillio. Amillio, who was completely limp, turning colors,
Oh no.
his limbs just hanging. She came in and brought Amillio into the nurse's room. Shortly after that, Miss Murch saw Isabel Carrion come in with Mateo. And Shelby described to you how Mateo looked. He was gasping for air, had bubbles coming from his mouth, had peed through his diaper, sweat through his onesie, was holding an empty bottle. You also heard that he looked like he was going to have a stroke, and that when she touched him and held him, he was hot to the touch. And ladies and gentlemen, these characteristics, these observations are of the child that survived. These observations, gasping for air, bubbly mouth, hot to the touch, those are of the child that is okay. Imagine what Amillio was going through. She and Harmony took Mateo into the bathroom where they put water on him, tried to cool him down. They continued their attempts to cool him down when they brought him back out. You actually saw those attempts in the video surveillance where Shelby's holding Mateo and Harmony's patting under his clothes with the wet cloth, trying to cool him down. Then they go and rinse out his dirty milk, rotten milk probably at that time, bottle and fill it with water for him. And Shelby also told you something that was very telling, ladies and gentlemen. While the defendant was in the waiting room, she was approached and asked by another mother, the mother and grandmother combo sitting on the black couch, to watch their child while she went to the bathroom.
Ooh.
And the defendant did.
Wow.
This was over an hour before, and you can see it in the video surveillance,
She's-
over an hour before the defendant went into her procedure. At that time, she knew people in there were staying. They were waiting for their appointments. They were willing to help each other out. She knew she could have asked one of them, hey, if I bring my kids in here, can you watch them for the few minutes I'm in my procedure? She knew there were options. She chose not to take those options because that would have interfered with her work. At some point, another husband, wife, and another child came into the waiting room. You saw that, ladies and gentlemen. It was the man and the young boy that sat just around the corner from the defendant's chair. You also heard from Ian Blue. He went to the location with Shelby that day. They were friends. You heard from both Ian and Shelby that it was so hot outside. Before they went in, they stopped at the gas station to get ice cream. It was a noticeably hot day. You heard from Ian that throughout the time the defendant was in the waiting room, there were probably about 10 people in total that came and went and were waiting. You also saw that when you watched the video surveillance. You heard from him that the waiting room atmosphere was friendly, engaging, and all the women were talking to each other. This was not an environment, ladies and gentlemen, that is meant to be serene, calm, quiet. That was not this waiting room. This was the waiting room that would have been conducive to kids. This is a waiting room that was conducive to kids. This was a waiting room that had kids in it and that the defendant knew had kids in it. You also heard from Ian, and this was the very important part of his testimony, that at approximately 3 p.m. on that day, he went outside to take his dog to go to the bathroom, Bowser. When he was outside, he was standing by the tree, right by the fence, about 2 to 3 feet from the defendant's car. And he was very clear and unequivocal when he told you, ladies and gentlemen, that that car was not running. There were no signs that that car was running, that any of the systems were running, that there was any air conditioning going on at about.
So that's the other thing, Chad. Apparently, when we'll see her try to argue this in the defense closing, but she says she claims that when she left the kids in the car, that the AC was on. So, I mean, it's still inexcusable if there were other people inside of the waiting room with kids. The fact that you really watch somebody else's kids, you can't make this stuff up. You really can't.
3 p.m. He also told you he had no idea there was anybody inside of the vehicle. There was absolutely nothing to indicate there was anybody inside of the vehicle, and he was unable to see inside due to the dark tint. While Ian was outside, he noticed it was so hot that he had to bring Bowser back inside to get water. Ian recognized that it was too hot outside for his dog to remain outside during the same time of day that the defendant had her kids essentially locked.
Wow. So there's another witness that had his dog in the car, but bought his dog inside because he knew it was too hot. How does the dog owner know? And you don't, as a mom.
Ian thought it was too hot for his dog, but the defendant did not think it was too hot for her babies.
Wow.
Ian was back inside of the business when the defendant left, and shortly after, the defendant came back in with Amillio, followed by Mateo with Miss Carrion after that. And this is where Ian described Mateo as looking like a wet chicken, which is a term that's commonly used in the the Spanish language, according to Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue explained to you that Mateo looked like he was going to have a heat stroke and was gasping for air. These statements, ladies and gentlemen, they might sound redundant. Why did we have to hear the same thing from Shelby that we heard from Ian? And that's because, ladies and gentlemen, these statements show you that they're true. Two different people made the same observations and came in and told you the same thing. That is evidence. That's corroboration that what they saw actually happened. Their testimony is supported by other testimony, other evidence. And while Ian was on the stand, he talked about some of the conversation that was happening inside of the business. He told you, ladies and gentlemen, that when the man and his son came in, there was a statement made that they had to come in because it was simply too hot to wait outside.
I can't.
This statement was made in the same vicinity, in earshot of the defendant. You know this because Mr. Blue specifically told you that he interpreted for the man, and he repeated the statement loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. Not only was this statement made, ladies and gentlemen, there was a conversation that followed. A conversation whereby the people in the waiting room started almost joking about the fact, yeah, imagine how hot it is outside with how warm it is in here, and we have some air conditioning. Those conversations, ladies and gentlemen, took place with the defendant while her kids were trapped in the heat. Even those conversations did not make the defendant think, oh, I should probably go check on them. It is pretty hot. She heard the statements, and much like everything else she did that day, she ignored them as they related to her children. She ignored her children. She did not check on them, even though other people came in and were talking about how hot it was outside. Then you heard from Ms. Carrion, Isabel Carrion. Harmony.
For everybody coming in, this woman is on trial for leaving her kids in the car while she was inside of a med spa getting a BBL. This happened in California. This is happening today. So these closing arguments are taking place today. She is likely going to get a very fast verdict, and I'll poll y'all in a second. I mean, I don't even think this poll is proper. I think now we should just start talking about how fast this jury is going to come back with the verdict. I mean, I'm voting guilty. Like, court of public opinion, if that's me, I have guilty all day. I don't know if there's anything you can say to change my mind. And then you have a prosecutor who is expecting a child herself delivering this closing argument. It's a very powerful piece, but at the same time, it's very sad what happened to this young man who lost his life at 12 months, 1 year old.
His assistant. She told you that the defendant came in that day for a treatment to her buttocks area. You later learned it's referred to as a liquid BBL, a liquid Brazilian butt lift. Injections into somebody's butt to enhance the appearance. She's the assistant. After the defendant's procedure, she did not pay right away. She said she had to go to her car to get her phone. Some time had passed. Ms. Carrion was concerned that the defendant was going to leave without paying, so she went outside. Her car, her BMW, the white one in the photograph, was parked directly next to the defendant's. When she got to the car, she saw the defendant holding Amillio and moving him upside down. Not on the phone with 911.
What?
Not giving CPR, not trying to get help, moving Amillio up and down in the car. This action, ladies and gentlemen, came after, from what you heard from Detective McNabb, that the defendant walked towards the business and then back out. Again, that might seem like a small piece of evidence, but think to yourself, she obviously started walking towards the business because she thought perhaps she could get help. And then realized, but then they're all gonna know that I have my kids with me. They're all gonna know that I left my kids in the heat in the car. That's not gonna look bad, or not going to look good, I apologize. So she turns around and walks back to her car. About 2 minutes later is when Ms. Carrion comes out, sees her in her car, tells her, you need to go get help. Your baby is not okay. At that point, she goes inside, subsequently comes back out and calls 911 at 4:40 p.m. 6 minutes passed in that time period, ladies and gentlemen. Think about 6 minutes and how long 6 minutes truly feels. And you're going to see how long Amillio sat there again without getting the help he needed while his mother, his protector, was trying to figure out how to cover up her actions. You heard from Ms. Carrion that the defendant was not showing any urgency, was not screaming, was not asking for help. Ms. Carrion only knew Mateo was in the back seat because she saw him due to the rolled down passenger side window. The window that was only rolled down after the defendant went back outside. The defendant did not tell her, help my other baby. She just took off with Amillio inside. Isabel saw Mateo in the back seat. She described Mateo as too hot. His skin was red, and flushed all over. He was weak and drenched with sweat. She also described the inside of the car. She initially said that it was hot, very hot. And then she agreed that she had actually told Ian, and I apologize for my language, ladies and gentlemen, but she had told Ian that when she reached her hand in the car to get Mateo, the inside of the car was hot as hell. Compare that statement, ladies and gentlemen, to the defendant's description of inside the car during her interviews with detectives. Compare that, the statement of Ms. Carrion, who has no reason to embellish, no reason to exaggerate, to the defendant who said, it was pretty comfortable. When you know, ladies and gentlemen, that there's no way, shape, or form that vehicle could have been comfortable at that time. Ms. Carrion told you that when she got into the car to get Mateo, the car was not running. The air conditioner was not on. Those also contradict the defendant's statements. And again, ladies and gentlemen, and I will encourage you, when you are considering what statements are credible, what statements to give the most weight to, take out Calif 226, put that on your desk while you're thinking of the witnesses, and ask yourself, well, did Shelby, Ian, Harmony, who we'll get to in a second, Isabel, did they have any reason to lie? Did they have any reason to exaggerate? Did they have any bias or interest in this case? Those are things that are outlined for you in 226, things that you get to consider. And the answer to all those questions is going to be no. These are people who did not know the defendant until that day. They didn't know her before, they don't know her after. They were there for some cosmetic treatment and really ended up in a horrible situation. A horrible situation that is probably going to impact their entire lives. So when you are looking at what these people said and you're comparing it to what the defendant said, then ask yourself, well, did the defendant have reason to lie? Absolutely. Did the defendant have reason to downplay? Absolutely. Did the defendant have a personal interest in how the case is decided? Absolutely. Does the defendant have a bias in this case? Absolutely. You take those two statements, you take the inconsistencies, and when you use those with Calif 226, you are going to find that you have to believe and give credence.
I mean, and it's California, right? Like these type of things do happen to children. I got rid of it, but I had a Lincoln Nautilus. And one thing that the car and a lot of smart cars these days will do is if you leave something in the back seat and it detects some type of weight, it will remind you. You know, it's just like sometimes I'll put stuff back there and I might forget I have a jacket or something back there, but it will let you know before you get out of the car. It's just like, you're going to leave this, AV? You're going to check? Can you check to make sure it's not a human or a dog or anything else that needs some attention? So a lot of smart cars these days actually do have these new capabilities to start thinking about this technology and reminding drivers to make sure that all passengers are out of the cars. Now, the reason why this is a big deal and why I think that this prosecutor is going to make this a very lengthy closing argument is to deter people from doing this again, right? It's going to happen, but one of their responsibilities is to minimize crime. And that's why I think they're going very hard on Maya. I mean, it is selfish, like let's be honest here. She went to get a BBL while her children were in the car. And again, what's the plan? Like, how do you sit down after that? Like, how did you think you were going to drive home? Like I don't understand the logic here, but let's keep going and listen on. We've got about a few minutes left on this, and then we're going to hear from the defense. I am going to start polling you guys to see how fast we think we're going to get a verdict from the jury on this one.
And credibility to Harmony, Isabel, Shelby, and Ian long before the defendant. You heard from the nurse, Ms. Pacheco. She's explained to you that she is an aesthetic injector. She provides cosmetic procedures to help enhance appearances. These procedures are not medically necessary. Certainly the procedure that the defendant was receiving that day, the liquid Brazilian butt lift, was not medically necessary. These are things to make people feel beautiful. They are elective chosen procedures. She told you that the defendant's procedure took about 15 to 20 minutes. That's consistent with what you saw in the video surveillance. She told you that during the morning hours of June 29th, 2025, she told the defendant that she could bring her kids in. You saw those text messages, ladies and gentlemen. You have them with you in the back if you want to look at them again. That conversation, from both the defendant and from Ms. Pacheco, happened before the defendant left Visalia that day. Ms. Pacheco told you that the defendant told her she had to go get her phone from her car because she left it in there because it was dead. The defendant told you that was a lie. That was not what she told Ms. Pacheco. So again, ask yourself, what reason did Harmony have to make that up? Absolutely none. And also look back at her testimony and consider how that testimony came out. She didn't come in here and say, yeah, she said it was dead and that's why she went out and now I know she's lying. She actually couldn't remember right away if that is what the defendant said. She refreshed her memory with the transcript of the statement she gave on the date of the interview. She didn't come in here with any malice. She didn't have an agenda. She was just testifying to you what she saw and what she observed on that day. She saw the defendant then come back in with Amillio. Amillio was limp, purple, and foaming at the mouth. Again, common descriptions throughout, ladies and gentlemen. When she saw Amillio, she told the defendant to call an ambulance because it was clear that he was not okay. And shortly after that, she saw Isabel come inside with Mateo. She said Mateo looked very hot, was hot to the touch, and his heart was beating really fast. This is an important statement, ladies and gentlemen, especially in light of what you heard yesterday from Dr. Thomas Riley. Harmony Pacheco, a registered nurse, told you that she felt Mateo's heart rate and it was beating really fast. Yesterday, Dr. Thomas Riley testified. He testified in the context of Amillio. He was a doctor for Amillio. But he also told you that hyperthermia, one of the things that happens when somebody's body is going through that, is their heart begins to beat really fast, essentially until it gives out. So you know that this statement is consistent with what could have been happening. And that Mateo might not have been as bad as Amillio, but he sure was on his way had he not been caught when he was. Based on Mateo's appearance, she took him to the bathroom where she put water on him. She then started putting wet cloths on his body to try to cool him down because he looked like he was going to have a stroke. His bottle, was empty and appeared that it had old milk in it. So she had Isabel rinse it out and put water in it. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you know it was old milk because the defendant testified in court and told detectives that she had left each child with one bottle of milk. One bottle of milk for 2.5 hours, including the drive from Visalia to Bakersfield. Then text messages, you'll have those in the back with you. They just confirmed the conversation. Then you heard from Nurse Gabrielle Long. She was the treating nurse to Amillio. She told you that Amillio's temperature was 107 degrees when he came in on June 29th, 2025. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to consider something very important when you think about the testimony of Gabrielle Long, Elizabeth Bond, and Dr. Thomas Riley. These are medical professionals who, by their own testimony, see emergencies all day, every day. Not a single one of them had to come in here and reference any documents as to this incident. Not a single one of them had issues remembering Amillio or Mateo from that day. You heard Gabrielle Long tell you that she had never seen a temperature that high in her career. She also told you that Amillio's temperature was likely higher when he was in the car before he had been exposed to the airflow outside, exposed to the air conditioner in the ambulance, and transported into the hospital. Nurse Elizabeth Bond, she provided treatment to Mateo. She came in here and told you that Mateo was fine. He was responsive, he was okay. The one thing she noticed that was interesting to her was that Mateo was very clingy to the hospital staff. And she said, this is weird because most children don't want to be around us. Most children go away from us. He was clingy. He wanted to be held. He wanted to be comforted. And why is that, ladies and gentlemen? Because that day, just before he met Elizabeth Bond, he had been abandoned.
Man, these kids were like, F my mama, save me, save me.
He had been abandoned.
Get me away from her.
By the person that's supposed to protect him.
Oh my
He sought out
God.
comfort in strangers because he didn't get that from his mother. She explained to you that the difference between Mateo's temperature and Amillio's, again, can be explained by their age, the body's ability to release sweat, regulate its temperatures as the body gets older. Dr. Thomas Riley, you heard from him yesterday. He's been an emergency room physician for 30 years. You saw how he testified, ladies and gentlemen. When he was talking about Amillio, there were times when he appeared he was going to get emotional. He talked about the lengths they went through to try to save Amillio. That Amillio suffered from cardiac arrest in the field. When he came to the emergency room, he was intubated and they were doing resuscitation efforts. When Amillio arrived, he was pale, ashen, cyanotic, meaning purple or hypoxic, not getting air, no oxygen flow to his body. Amillio was literally lifeless. Is a quote from Dr. Riley. Literally lifeless. He and other ER personnel attempted life-saving measures for at least 40 minutes. When Amillio arrived, his temperature was 107 to 108 degrees. They took steps to cool him down, including ice packs all over his body and a cooling IV. He described these as being as aggressive as they could to try to save Amillio. He told you that a temperature of 107 is not compatible for life. Someone cannot live. A body cannot sustain that temperature.
Oh my God.
Heart rate fluctuation caused by temperatures cannot sustain life. Dr. Riley explained to you that being exposed to extreme heats for an extended period of time causes the organs in the body to be impacted, causes a chemical breakdown of the cells. And he described to you that when this organ failure is happening, this breakdown of the cells is occurring, that person experiences these things. The person going through this begins to have an overwhelming sense of heat. They may begin to become overwhelmed and hyperventilate, feel like they are suffocating. He said this person can feel like they are being strangled, all from being exposed to the heat. He also told you that Amillio had signs of rigor mortis, stiffening of the muscles in the body as a result of the body shutting down. And that rigor mortis typically begins to set in within 1 to 2 hours.
Wow.
Amillio's organs and his body had already shut down at least 1 to 2 hours before Dr. Riley had ever seen him.
Wow. So on
Probably the most important sentence you heard from Dr. Riley. Early intervention could have saved his life. Early intervention could have saved his life, ladies and gentlemen. And there's one person in this world that could have gotten him the early intervention. One person that knew he was in the car. One person that had a legal duty to him. One person that was obligated to check on him and get him that early intervention. The defendant, by simply going to check on Amillio, could have prevented all of this. But she, again, chose not to. Early intervention could have saved his life. But the defendant did not allow for that to happen. He told you how heartbreaking it was to see Amillio, how gut-wrenching it was when they could not save him. And then you heard about the recreation. Again, kind of like the video surveillance. Detectives wanted to ensure they took steps to make this as thorough as possible. And Detective Barthelmess, well, we don't know what was happening that day. We don't know how it felt inside the car. Let's try to find out. Let's simulate that day as best as we can. So they looked up temperatures. They found a date that had temperatures almost identical, at times identical to the date of June 29th, 2025, and that was July 2nd. They got the car. They ran the car for an appropriate amount of time. They took the defendant's car to 31 South Real Road. They parked the car in the same exact parking spot and made sure to arrive in the parking lot at the same time the defendant arrived. And ladies and gentlemen, it's also important to keep in mind that during this recreation, you were informed, you were told they did the recreation in a light most favorable to the defendant. They took her for her word at what she said she did that day, and they did the recreation as such, which meant they stayed in the car for a little while. They used the same times. They used the same parking space. They ultimately got out of the car about 2:09, shut the doors, locked everything up, and left the car. They left the car with thermometers that had been appropriately calibrated, thermometers that were working, and body-worn cameras to capture the temperatures inside of the car. You also heard that at 4:08 p.m., Detective Jordan's body-worn camera shut off. Could not record anymore. At 4:16 p.m., Detective Barthelmess' camera, which was on Amillio's seat, shut off at 4:16 p.m. Both of those cameras gave the same notice: critical internal temperature. The car got too hot for an electronic device. It was too hot to sustain an electronic device while Amillio and Mateo were still strapped inside of it.
Damn, that's terrible. That also reminds me, you guys know, like even with your phones, like if you live in warm areas, if your phone is laying out for a little bit and it's in the sun, you do get that warning of a high temperature as well. So that's crazy.
You have Exhibit 75, and that is the item that was judicially noticed by the court, that the temperatures in Bakersfield on June 29th, 2025 at 2:54 p.m. was 101 degrees Fahrenheit. At 3:54 p.m., 102 degrees Fahrenheit. And the high temperature that day was 102 degrees. The high temperature that day occurred while Amillio and Mateo were inside of the car. The temperatures in Bakersfield on July 2nd, 2025, the date of the recreation, 2:54 p.m., 101 degrees, identical to the date of June 29th, 2025. The temperature at 3:54 p.m. on July 2nd, 2025, 101 degrees. 1 degree cooler, actually, than the date of the actual incident. The high on July 2nd, 2025 was 101 degrees. And again, we just went over this, the steps that the detectives took to make the recreation as identical, as similar to the date and issue. Rolled up the windows, shut the door, left the AC running as the defendant described. And that is a setting 4 out of 7 at 60 degrees. With one air vent in the car, ladies and gentlemen, an air vent that the defendant told you was only in the front of the car. Now, I say they did it as the defendant told them because I anticipate, and you have heard, there is statements from the defendant that she left her air conditioner running, that she left her car on. And I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to accept those statements with caution. Take those statements in light of CalCrim 226 and recognize that although the detectives considered that information in doing the recreation, that is not indicative that they were taking that statement to be true. They were simply conducting the recreation in a light most favorable to the defendant. You do not have any independent evidence that that air conditioner was left on or how it was running at the time. The only evidence you have of any air conditioner came from the defendant, and we'll discuss that in a few minutes. Detective Barthelmess specifically told you the questions they wanted to answer with the recreation. Does the engine shut off after an hour as indicated in the owner's manual? The owner's manual that the detectives bothered to look at, but the defendant never did. The defendant specifically told you she never looked at the owner's manual, doesn't even know if she ever had one. That was in her testimony on direct examination. That could have provided her some useful information when she chose to leave her kids in the car, but she didn't care. What was the internal temperature of the vehicle when defendant left Mateo and Amillio inside of the vehicle? If the vehicle does shut off after an hour, how long does it take the internal temperature to rise? What is the maximum temperature inside of the vehicle once the vehicle is shut off? How long were Amillio and Mateo exposed to these temperatures before defendant returned to the vehicle? And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They got answers to every single question they had. The car did, in fact, shut off after 1 hour, as indicated in the owner's manual. Even with the air conditioner set as described by the defendant, the coolest Amillio seat ever got was 80 degrees. And that's because by her own statement, if to be believed, she left it on the middle setting with an air vent only in the front seat. The air wasn't circulating to the back seat. Amillio and Mateo were exposed to temperatures of over 100 degrees for over an hour before the defendant returned to the vehicle. Amillio's seat reached ambient temperatures of 116 degrees. And I say ambient temperatures, ladies and gentlemen, because that is the temperature that came off the thermometer that was essentially hovering in the middle of Amillio's seat. But you heard from Detective Chad Ott that the temperature in Amillio's seat as he was sitting in there was likely significantly higher due to his body being in the seat and his body heat going into that area. Temperatures inside the vehicle, again, ladies and gentlemen, you have this. You'll have it in the back with you. Was testified to, and it is part of the video surveillance. But the car hit 100.5 degrees at 3:25 p.m.
Wow.
By 3:30, had jumped to 103 degrees. By 3:35, had jumped again to 105.2 degrees. By 3:40, had jumped to 107 degrees. By 3:55, jumped to 110.6 degrees. 4:05, 112.4 degrees. 4:15, the last recorded temperature by body cam camera before it died because of the heat, 114 degrees. And the temperature when detectives opened the doors at 4:33 p.m. was 116 degrees.
Jeez.
You'll have the photos of the thermometer. You'll have the video of the temperatures rising. You saw it in court. It was boring. Some might even describe that as painful. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? You got to watch those temperatures rising in the air-conditioned courtroom. Amillio and Mateo experienced that in real time. They experienced those temperatures rising with nowhere to go, nowhere to escape. You got to have the air conditioning, your bottles of water. I believe we even interrupted to take a short break at one point. Consider how painful that was to watch. And Amillio and Mateo had to experience that in real time. You heard from Detective Chad Ott. You heard about his background, his science. He told you about studies he's participated in, studies he's read. Studies he's read in relation to recreations in babies left in hot cars. And he actually told you that he found the results of Detective Barthelmess's recreation to be quite favorable to the defendant. And he said that based upon the studies he read. For example, one study had to do with temperatures, external temperatures outside of 73 to 93 degrees. And the internal temperature of that car rose to 135 degrees, ladies and gentlemen. Detective Ott told you that the manner in which the recreation was conducted was scientifically sound, that it was done in the way to best achieve the most accurate results. And he even told you that he was quite impressed by the amount of effort that had been placed into recreation. He was impressed by the steps the detectives took and thought about to make this recreation as accurate as possible. And then again, the video surveillance. Ladies and gentlemen, we sat through that video surveillance about 2 hours in court. There wasn't sound, there wasn't talking. Almost the entire time, we watched the defendant sit in one single chair. Again, it was boring. We might even call parts of it, most of it, or all of it painful. But again, ladies and gentlemen, you experienced those 2.5 hours in the comforts of an air-conditioned courtroom. Amillio and Mateo, they experienced those 2.5 hours trapped inside of a hot car during the hottest time of day. And I say trapped because they had no way to get out. They had no means to get help. They were trapped in an inferno, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, it was painful to sit there for 2 hours, but you had water, you had air conditioning, you had airflow throughout the courtroom. Amillio and Mateo did not get that same courtesy from their mother. And this is just a kind of a combination of the video surveillance with the recreation, where you can see the defendant sitting inside the business, chit-chatting, engaging, laughing, smiling at different times when her vehicle is 105.2 degrees outside, 107 degrees outside, sitting there, legs crossed, arm on her chin, not a care in the world. Her car with her two children is 107 degrees, best case scenario at that time.
Wow.
108 degrees, still sitting there chatting, not a care in the world. 109.5 degrees, still sitting there, legs crossed, chatting, looking at the other patrons, having a conversation. 110.6 degrees, still sitting in the same chair. Cool. Access to the bathroom, water if she needs it, talking to the other patrons. 111.5 degrees, bent over, engaging in conversation, sitting in the same chair. 112.4 degrees, still.
So this prosecutor, you could see the strategy here. She's literally trying to show the jury that this woman was so determined to get this BBL while her kids were in the car, both 1 and 2 years old, each of them with the AC on and a bottle, but the car turned off after an hour. You can see her just sitting right there. And there's another mom in there. She's standing up, and you could see that there's another kid with a backpack right there on the couch. So she's making conversation with another parent, or at least someone who has a kid in their company. Meanwhile, her kids are in the car. So again, they're going to try to make an example out of this lady to prevent people in California from, seeing, or at least making sure that they take their kids out of the car on hot days. Like, they want to deter this type of crime from happening.
Just sitting there chatting, perhaps talking about their BBLs, their 4th of July plans, while her kids are burning in her car. 113 degrees is when she essentially gets up. She doesn't leave. She's gone from that chair. But at this point, she goes back into the treatment room, down the steps, down a hall, down another hall, still in the business, when her car's getting up to 114 degrees. She starts walking out at 4:33 p.m. She's walking out of the air-conditioned building while her car is a temperature of 116 degrees. And she's walking out not to go check on the kids, but to go get her phone to pay for her treatment. You heard Dr. Gleneski testify about the autopsy. He performed the autopsy of Amillio. This autopsy took place on July 5th, 2025. And he explained to you that Amillio had edema, or commonly referred to as swelling of the brain. The brain swelled, and it continued to swell and swell until it began to shut down. The shutting down of the brain caused the rest of the organs to begin to shut down. He also told you that somebody going through this edema, swelling of the brain, can feel it within their body. They experience it. This is not a quick death, ladies and gentlemen. This is a slow, painful death where the person begins to feel lethargic. They begin going limp, perhaps unable to speak. They lose the bodily functions. They may urinate, may defecate on themselves because the organs preventing all of that are no longer working.
And this is a baby. He's 1. He's 12 months, And that's why they're throwing a book at her. They're really going ham on her. And if you guys think about it, we've seen a few fast trials on this channel. This is, in my opinion, or at least this is the fastest one I've ever covered. Because if this took place this past summer, that means that she's only been sitting in jail for 5 months.
This person might start having seizures and will likely show foamy secretions, all things that were present with Amillio. Dr. Gleneski explained to you that the body begins to shut down at 104 degrees. But when Amillio arrived to the hospital at 5:00 p.m., his temperature was 107 degrees, which is probably lower than it was in the car. Amillio's body began shutting down a significant amount of time before he was found by his mother or by the ambulance personnel. Dr. Gleneski, in addition to Dr. Riley, told you that it is impossible to survive a temperature of 107 degrees. Dr. Gleneski, impossible to survive. Dr. Riley, that temperature is not compatible with life. The cause of death was hyperthermia, commonly referred to as heat stroke. And this is where his testimony got interesting, ladies and gentlemen. He told you that he initially, and he wrote on the death certificate, that the manner of death was an accident. But he explained to you why he made that finding. And he said, I hate making findings like this because I have to do it based upon just a little bit of information. Just the information that his investigator provides to him. He told you, I was 50-50 on accident versus homicide. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's important to recognize and consider these are medical terms. Medically an accident, medically a homicide. This is not a legal term. It is not a legal definition for you to consider. You are the judges of whether or not this was legally murder, legally homicide. These are medical terms. Homicide meaning the death at the hands of another. He told you he didn't have enough information about the defendant's intent or mind state. He didn't have her recorded interviews. He wasn't able to watch those. And he told you that his opinion would likely change were he to find out that she knew it was dangerous and she did it anyway. He was 50-50 before he had information on whether or not the defendant knew the dangers and acted anyway. So he said accident, but he told you that this likely could have been a homicide as well, medically speaking. Now, let's talk about the defendant's interviews, ladies and gentlemen. You will have these interviews with you. You will have them in the back. You can watch them. And as you heard in opening, and as I told you today earlier, and you probably gathered through the course of the evidence, the crux of this case, the crux of your decision is going to be, what did the defendant know and when did she know it? Her interviews, both her first interview on June 29th and her second interview on July 3rd, give you those answers. She admitted to coming to Bakersfield, leaving the kids in the car, had the kids strapped in the car. Those items of evidence, ladies and gentlemen, are uncontested. Nobody's arguing those. Nobody's saying they didn't happen. But one thing she did say in her first interview was she did not know how long she left the children in the car. But you know, after watching the video surveillance and hearing her testimony, that she did know how long they were in the car. She knew how long she was in the business. She was wearing an Apple Watch. Between 2:27 p.m. and 4:08 p.m., she checked her Apple Watch no less than 45 times. She knew how much time was passing.
Oh, God.
She knew she wasn't just going to be in there for the quick 15 to 20 minutes.
Say it ain't so.
She knew that after the first 20 minutes. She knew that after the second 20 minutes. She knew that after an hour passed. And at 3:33, ladies and gentlemen, the nurse specifically told her there was still another person ahead of you. At 3:30, and almost an hour and a half of having been in the business, she knew it was still going to be probably another 40 minutes to sit in that chair without any actions. She said in her first interview that she left her phone with her kids because they were watching TV, that she propped it up on the headrest so that they can see it while they were sitting in their chairs with their cookie, their one bottle of milk, and their candies. In her second interview, she tells detectives that she didn't bring the kids inside because they were sleeping and she didn't want to wake them up. So were they watching TV or were they sleeping, ladies and gentlemen? These might seem like small inconsistencies, but it's the inconsistencies that tell you whether or not she is being completely honest, whether or not she's being completely honest with the detectives, and whether or not she was completely honest with you in court. She estimated she was in the waiting room for about an hour. You know that's not true. She knew that wasn't true. She admitted that she did not go to check on the boys at any time. She told you that when she went back to her car, the car was still running. You know from Ian's testimony that that's not accurate. You know from Isabel's testimony that that's not accurate. You know from the recreation that that is physically impossible. Isabel told you that it was hot when she got back to the car. It was not on. The AC was not running. It was hot to the touch. She told you that Amillio was hot to the touch, that Mateo's cheeks were red. That's what alerted her that something was wrong. Those statements, those observations are not consistent with her statement that her car was still running, that her air conditioner was still on. And she says, it sounds stupid for me to say, like, oh, like, I didn't mean for that to happen because, like, I did leave them, but I thought they were going to be okay. It sounds stupid for me to say. Why did she say it that way, ladies and gentlemen? It sounds stupid for me to say I thought they were going to be okay because I know better. It sounds stupid for me to say this because everybody knows better. Then she says that she knew her sister would probably say yes if she asked her to watch Mateo and Amillio, but she didn't want to irritate her. That statement was also different than how she testified on the stand. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Then she testified on the stand that her concern was not that the kids would be running around in the waiting room. Her concern was that they were sleeping. But in this first interview, just hours after that.
And she lied on the stand. Okay. For those that are coming in, this woman, young lady, went into med spa to get a BBL and left her kids in the car. One died of a heat stroke. He was 1 year old and the other one was 2. She claims that she left the car running, put her phone in the back seat so they could watch TV or whatever. I mean, they're 1 and 2. Can they really, can they really understand what's going on? She gave them cookies and candy and just went inside to get a BBL, and then one of them died.
The incident, ladies and gentlemen, about 8:25 p.m. on June 29th, 2025, she says, Detective McNabb asks her, so your concern was they'd be running around the waiting room without you. She said, yeah. Your concern is they would be running around, which is why you didn't bring them in. Yeah. But now you know she had a way to prevent that.
She had a
She had
sitter.
her stroller. She could have buckled them in their stroller. She did not ask about Amillio's condition until 30 to 40 minutes into the interview. Right as the detectives were telling her they were going to take a break, she asks about Amillio's condition. Why did she wait that long to ask? Because she already knew. Because she knew what she did. She knew before she did it, it was dangerous. And at that time, she knew everything had come full circle.
It's like Alicia writing
Actually happened.
with
She
a
said that
pencil.
she knew that leaving the children in the car was a bad decision. Acknowledged that her story about the air being on did not make sense when considered with all of the evidence. Told Detective McNabb that what she did was irresponsible. She told Detective McNabb that she thought about the fact that it was irresponsible when she got out of the car and left the babies inside. She told you yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, that she didn't realize it was irresponsible until after the fact. June 29, 2025, 8:25 p.m., thought about the fact that it was irresponsible when she got out of the car and left the babies inside. That's implied malice murder, ladies and gentlemen. That's an admission to knowing it was dangerous and acting anyway. Detective McNabb, have you heard the radio ads about not leaving your kids in the car? I mean, a lot of cars nowadays, when you get out of the car, they tell you to make sure to check for your kids. Like it's, that's kind of an irresponsible thing to do. Defendant, yeah. Detective McNabb, I mean, do you know that? Defendant, yeah. Detective McNabb, okay. Did you think about that when you were getting out of your car? Ladies and gentlemen, these questions could not be more clear. Did you think about the dangers when you were getting out of your car? Defendant's answer, yeah. So this storyline that you heard yesterday,
Wow.
that she didn't realize it was bad, dangerous, or irresponsible until after the fact, you cannot believe that testimony, ladies and gentlemen.
She took the stand.
And her incentives to lie, her reasons to lie, with the statements she made to Detective McNabb under completely different circumstances.
She took the stand.
Supreme Court testimony. You cannot. It doesn't.
It's like Alicia all over again.
I mean, Detective McNabb. I mean, if you knew that and you thought about it, what made you think it was okay to leave him? I don't know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if she was truly misunderstanding what Detective McNabb was asking her, as she wants you to believe, when he's asking her what made you think it was okay to leave them, her answer is, oh, because beforehand I didn't realize it was bad. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you, detective. I now understand it was bad. I now understand it was dangerous. I didn't realize you've been asking me about what I knew beforehand. That's not her answer. That was never her answer. And look at this recording. Consider this recording, ladies and gentlemen. She is not confused by the questions. She does not have to ask the detectives to repeat their questions. She understands what she's being asked and she answers them directly. Detective, and now we're moving on to the defendant's interview number 2. Some more statements that show you that this is exactly second-degree murder. Detective McNabb, but I do want to just talk a little bit about what you were thinking as this was going on, okay? There's a lot of talking like, have you ever heard like the radio ads about not leaving your kids in the car? You have? Question mark. Watch the video. He says you have with a question mark because she's nodding her head. What did you think could happen if you do leave them? Like prior to this happening, did you understand? Prior to this happening, did you understand? Clear as can be as to the timing the detective is talking about, ladies and gentlemen. And I understand the circumstances are different, but what do you think could happen if you left your kids there? Defendant, what happened, I guess? Then he follows up. What happened with Amillio? Question mark. Did you know that prior to this happening? Completely unambiguous question, ladies and gentlemen. He does not say, do you know this? Do you know this now? Is this your current understanding? He says, did you know that prior to this happening? Defendant responds, I've seen the news and stuff, but I didn't really think that would happen. I knew it can happen, but I didn't think it would happen to me. You saw the news? Like, have you seen news of this happening before? I mean, not actually, but I've heard people talk about it. Is there anything specific come to mind or just in general? Just in general. I knew this was bad in general from hearing people talk about it because everybody knows it's bad. This is information, ladies and gentlemen, that this day and age you cannot avoid. You cannot avoid knowing that leaving babies in a car can result in death. Everybody knows that. It's in the news media all the time. It's in ads all the time. Okay, did you think about that as you were getting out of the car? Again, another opportunity for the defendant to say, oh, you've been asking me if I thought it was dangerous before I did it? Let's back up, detective. I thought you were just asking me about if I knew it was dangerous now. This is yet another opportunity for her to say, oh, I've been misunderstanding you. But she doesn't, because she knew exactly what they were asking about. She says, I thought it's not like I just left him in there for him to fucking die. That's her statement, ladies and gentlemen. That's from the defendant's mouth when she's being asked about the dangers that she knew. After telling detective multiple times
Girl's
that she knew it was
ratchet.
dangerous.
Just
that
get
she
her
knew
out.
what could happen.
Put her under the jail.
That she
Ratchet.
knew that what could happen to Amillio, him
So
dying,
ratchet.
could happen if she took her action.
Very ratchet.
I want to know your thoughts, or what thoughts crossed your mind. You said it was irresponsible. Defendant, yeah. Detective McNabb. And I don't think anybody, that's cut off, I apologize. And then defendant, but they were sleeping. I didn't want to wake them up either. I didn't want to wake them up either. What does that one word, ladies and gentlemen? I didn't want to wake them up either. I thought about the options. I thought about the potential consequences. But I also didn't want to wake them up. So I let them continue to sleep, if they were sleeping to begin with. But I didn't want to wake them up either. One word, ladies and gentlemen, can tell you almost everything you need to know. She thought about the consequences. She thought about her choices, and she chose the choice that most benefited herself. It was a lot of time in the hot car, and obviously I don't want to beat around the bush here. Obviously, you know damage can happen from that. Defendant, and in the video, she nods her head up and down. Then you have the phone call with Amillio Gutierrez, the father to Amillio Mateo, that defendant testified about yesterday.
Oh, the dad.
You know you did was wrong, don't you? Obviously. Rosendo, huh? Defendant, obviously, I'm not an idiot. She's not an idiot, ladies and gentlemen. You heard Dr. Masako tell you yesterday she's not an idiot. Very average IQ, much like most of us in this courtroom. I'm not an idiot. Of course I knew it was wrong because I'm not an idiot. Only an idiot wouldn't know that you can't leave your kids in the car in the heat.
Oh,
That's what this
my
says.
God.
I'm not an idiot. Obviously, I know it was dangerous. Obviously, I knew that. And again, we touched on this earlier. I'm going to go into the defendant's court testimony in just a moment. As I discuss with you the statements made by the defendant, as you consider the defendant's testimony while you're in the back, consider Calcrim 226. That is the instruction that the law tells you the factors you can use in evaluating and judging a witness's testimony. And this is important, ladies and gentlemen. When the defendant decides to take the stand, she is to be given the same weight as every other witness. She does not get extra points because she didn't have to testify. She does not get extra points because she is the defendant. Once she takes that oath, she is a witness the same as anybody else. And ladies and gentlemen, you have heard about the presumption of innocence. The defendant is presumed to be innocent. She is not presumed to be honest. She is not presumed to be trustworthy. So when you consider her testimony, consider these factors. Did the witness understand the questions and answer them directly? You heard multiple times during cross-examination where I asked her a question, she answered initially and then added extra to the end. She understood the question, but she wanted to make sure she got her version of the answer out. Was the witness's testimony influenced by a factor such as bias or prejudice, a personal relationship with someone involved in the case, or a personal interest in how the case is decided? Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant, the witness you saw yesterday, the witness Maya Hernandez, is the only witness you heard from in this case that has a personal interest in how this case is decided. She's the only witness that has bias. She's the only witness that has reason to be untruthful. Next, did the witness make a statement in the past that is consistent or inconsistent with her testimony? This kind of goes hand in hand with the factor above. Was she inconsistent in the past? Yes. What does that tell you? That tells you that maybe she's not being honest with you. That tells you that maybe those biases, maybe her interest in how the case is decided is sneaking through from that stand. Those inconsistencies, different statements when she's testifying than what she said to Detective McNabb, those show you that she's not being honest with you, ladies and gentlemen.
So for those that are coming in, this took place about hour and a half, 2 hours ago. I believe the jury is still in deliberation right now. We're watching closing statements for the state of California to Maya Hernandez, the woman that is on trial for leaving her son in the car while she was getting a BBL. This is the prosecutor's opening statement. I believe they have a 10-minute brief recess that's coming, and then she's going to go on for about 20 minutes. Then we're going to hear from the defense team. The defense team, it's just that one guy and Maya, so good luck to them. But we're going to hear what they have to say. I'm hearing that Maya did take the stand yesterday, and that's what the prosecutor is talking about right now. But as far as deliberation, you guys know I'm not fans of deliberation late at night, right? But at the same time, it's 6 o'clock where I am, and it's 3 o'clock over there. So if you have not seen it, hold up. We have a poll up. All right. So there is a poll up right now in chat. I'm asking you guys, do you think the jury is going to give us a decision in less than an hour? The next option is an hour. The next option is more than an hour. And then we also have another option that is more than a day. So let's, I think that break is coming up any minute now, and then we'll skip through that break. And then they took an hour and a half for lunch, so I can skip through that too.
How reasonable is her testimony when you consider all of the evidence in this case? The thing with her testimony, ladies and gentlemen, is you can consider how unreasonable it is by only considering it against 2 other pieces of evidence. You can take her testimony in court and simply compare it to her 2 recorded interviews and know right off the bat exactly how unreasonable it is. But then when you start adding all the other evidence into the case, it blows her testimony out of the water. When you consider everything, including her own prior statements, you're going to see that her in-court testimony was not reasonable. Did other evidence prove or disprove a fact about which the witness testified? Absolutely, including her own statements. So let's talk.
I'm sorry, we need to take a break. It's 10:51, so let's take a 15-minute break. We'll have our camera off, and then we'll have the jury step out first, and then the audience. See you in 15 minutes.
All right, so they took a 15-minute break. We have TiVo time, so I can skip through that. The prosecutor is going to finish. They resume right around.
I'm speaking about the defendant's testimony in courts, and I just want to remind you that CalCrim 226, which will be in your packet of instructions, is going to be very helpful to you in how you decide to evaluate the defendant's testimony in courts. So first, we heard from the defendant that she made an appointment for a liquid BBL in Bakersfield for the day of June 29th.
And just a correction, guys, sorry, I forgot to mention it. There only one of the children passed. So there was 2. One was age 1 year old. He was 12 months. And then you have another one that was about 2 years old. She claimed she didn't want to bring them inside because they would be disruptive, whatever. Her sister even was an option to become a babysitter for that day. And she said she didn't want to annoy her sister, so that's why she didn't ask. But she still left the kids in the car. The youngest one is the one that passed away, so the 12-month-old.
2025. You heard at the beginning of her testimony on her direct examination, she attempted to kind of characterize this as a last-minute type of appointment that she didn't have prior notice of. But then you heard on cross-examination that she did in fact know about this appointment for many days ahead of time, and that she had been working on scheduling this appointment since early May. Plenty of time to make arrangements for her children. Chose not to. She told you during her testimony that she had asked her sister to babysit, and her sister said no. Again, this is another one of those things that might sound fairly insignificant, might be a small point to make, but it shows you that she was not being honest with you. Because you heard in her testimony or her interview, I apologize, with Detective McNabb, that she specifically talked about her sister and the potential of her sister babysitting. And she specifically says, I know if I asked her, she would say yeah, but I mean, like, I know it irritates her. That is not, I asked my sister and she said no. That is, I knew that was an option, but I didn't want to annoy her, so I chose not to take that option. That's evidence of a lie, ladies and gentlemen. You heard that she took both of the boys with her from Visalia to Bakersfield for the appointment, that she knew before she left Visalia that she could bring the boys inside with her. She didn't bring the boys in with her because they were sleeping. Now, this is consistent with her second statement to law enforcement, but it is inconsistent with her first statement, as well as her other testimony in court. And that is the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that she left the TV on for them. If they were sleeping and you don't want to wake them, turning on their favorite show, Paw Patrol, probably is not the appropriate route you want to take. The story that they were sleeping does not fit with the other evidence or the actions that the defendant herself said she took. She also said when she testified that one of her concerns was not the fact that the boys might be running around the lobby while she was in getting her appointment. But you saw, and you can see again, if you choose to watch it while you're deliberating, her recorded interview where she does say her concern was that they would be running around. You also now know that there was a solution to that should she have chosen to take it. She told you that she got out of the car about 2 p.m. and went into the business at 4:33 p.m. And it's important, ladies and gentlemen, that you look at these consistencies. And when you look at what she admitted to in court, look at those admissions and compare them to the physical evidence. She admitted and she was consistent with the things that there was evidence completely showing her to have been doing. This was thought out testimony. Again, she's not an idiot. She's a smart girl. She knew what she was doing and she knew what her plan was. She knew what her plan of attack was for her testimony. I'll admit to the things that I can't fight. I'll admit to the things that aren't that relevant. But I'm going to deny the issues. I'm going to deny my knowledge. I'm going to tell them I misunderstood. These were planned actions. This was planned testimony. And I think that came off very clearly throughout her testimony. She admitted that she never left to check on the boys. Again, that's going to be very hard to dispute based upon the video surveillance we watched in court. Acknowledged that she was checking her watch throughout her time in the business and that her watch did in fact display the time when she was looking at it. Left her phone in the car for the boys to watch Paw Patrol. And again, didn't bring the boys in because they were sleeping. This is not consistent with watching Paw Patrol, leaving candies and cookies with the boys.
They were up. She's lying.
She admitted to leaving the boys with 1 bottle of milk.
She was lying.
No water. She said that she thought the air conditioner would stay on while she was in the business. And ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm going to point out one word that I want you to pay close attention to. Every time
She has to be lying about that. Like, okay, if you're saying the reason why I did not bring the kids inside of the med spa was because I didn't want them to run around and they were sleeping. That's what she said in her interrogation footage. But why at the same time would you leave, why would you leave your phone in the car to watch TV or to allow them to watch TV or their favorite show, Paw Patrol? That means one of them was up. So you're lying. Like you just, it's a contradiction right there.
you heard the defendant mention leaving the air conditioner on. She used the word, I thought it would stay on. Never once did she say, I knew it would stay on. And that is because she didn't know that, because she had never read the owner's manual. She thought it would stay on, and that thought was wrong. But thinking that the air conditioner would stay on and thinking that that would make her actions okay also tells you that she knew it was wrong and dangerous to leave them in the car in the first place, or else she wouldn't have to reiterate these actions to you. She told you that she did not know if it had stayed on because, again, she never went to check on the boys. She never went to check on the car. She never left the business. She knew she was inside of the business for a long time. And at 3:30, she had confirmation that it would be at least another 20 to 40 minutes before her procedure. So even painting this in the light most favorable to the defendant, at that time, she could have thought, well, I'm not going to miss my appointment, so let me go check on them. But she didn't. Because at no point during that 2.5 hours, during that day, during the Maya day, were her children her priority or her thoughts.
Her BBL was.
She had a stroller with her that she could have strapped the boys in and brought them inside with her. You saw that in defense exhibit number 10. She knew what high temperatures could do to a body. And ladies and gentlemen, not only did she know what high temperatures and high fevers could do to a body, she knew what it could do to her children because she saw it happen to Mateo in the past. More knowledge of the dangers of what her actions could cause that day.
This lady's the worst.
She did not tell a single person that her babies were in the car. She told you she didn't tell people because she doesn't tell people her business. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she's chit-chatting for 2.5 hours. If you're really not telling people your business, you're not going to tell them that you're there to get butt injections. If you're really not telling people your business, you're not going to tell them in the first place that you have 2 kids. If you're not telling people your business, you're not going to sit there and talk about your 4th of July plans. If your life is that private that you don't want them to know anything about you, you sit there, you have your hands in your lap, and you are quiet. no need to participate. Or even more so, if your life and your privacy is that important to you, you wait in your car for your appointments. She didn't not tell people that her kids were with her because she was a private person. She didn't tell people her kids were with her because she knew it was wrong. She knew it was criminal. She knew that could get her in trouble. That is the only reasonable explanation as to why she did not tell the other patrons her kids were with her. It's the only logical explanation that she didn't tell the other patron her kids were with her. She didn't tell a single person that she was in a hurry. She didn't look at Shelby, Ian, or the two women on the couch. Hey, my kids are with me. Do you guys think I could jump your appointment? Hey, my kids are with me. I'm in a really big hurry. Would you mind if I went first? None of that. She didn't text the nurse and say, hey, I'm in a big hurry. How long is it going to be? Hey, can you get me in? I'm in a big hurry. What she did tell you was that she was blowing up the nurse's phone, essentially telling her she was late for her appointment and was in a hurry. This was a convenient line for the defendant to use until she learned that I had the text messages, that I had the entire conversation between her and Harmony that day, that I knew, and I could point out to you, the jury, that she did not mention one single time being in a hurry. The closest she got to that was asking at 1:59 if her appointment was still on, and then stating that her appointment was supposed to be at 1:30. Instead, at 1:11 p.m., she said, or I apologize, 1:10 p.m., she sends a picture of the building asking if she's in the right place. 1:11 p.m., Harmony responds, yes, hon, go ahead and wait in your car till the time. We're a little backed up, my apologies. 1:12, okay. 1:34, do I go in now? 1:54, again, defendant reaches out, hey girl. 1:59, is my appointment still on? 2:02, yes girl, come in for paperwork. 2:03, is it the room I just took a picture of under the 31? That's defendant. 2:04, Harmony, let me see. 2:47 p.m. I'm in here. I signed the paper, but my appointment was at 1:30.
Oh my God.
This statement, ladies and gentlemen, does not.
This lady is a mess. Not only was she super late for her appointment, right? 2:47, I'm here. I signed the paper, but my appointment was at 1:30. You're over an hour and a half late for your BBL, and you brought your kids and you left them in a car. What type of deplorable debauchery is this?
Say, I need to go right now. This does not say I'm in a hurry. This does not say how many people are ahead of me. This does not say, hey, Harmony, my kids are in the car. Can you speed this up? Can you get me in? Just simply says, I'm in here. I signed the paper, but my appointment was at 1:30. 3:11 p.m. Harmony says, hey, hon, what are you planning to get done? You just gave a deposit. I apologize for those typos. 3:11 p.m. BBL, the defendant responds. 3:12 p.m. defendant, I did the deal for the payment plan. 3:50. Okay. For 3:50 or 3:15, defendant.
Jesus. The BBL cost $600. I can't do it. Where do we find these cases? Where do we find them? Like what $600 BBL that you did on a payment plan? What?
Harmony says, okay, the 350 for 600 question mark. 316, the defendant says yes. Again, in this time period between 139, 140 and 316, there's no mention of, hey, I'm in a hurry. Do you have an estimate? Hey, we've been texting. Can I go wait in my car? And can you text me when it's time to go? My kids are with me. You don't see any of that, ladies and gentlemen, because that didn't happen. 327, defendant. But they said they would add 50 to the BBL and then another 50 because they rescheduled me 2 times. 3:33 p.m., Harmony. Okay, that's fine. You're next after my client's mom, hun. 3:33 p.m., she knows it's going to be another 20 to 40 minutes, and she continues to sit in the chair. 3:34 p.m., thank you with a question mark. 3:35 p.m. from Harmony. No, OMG, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience, Maya Hernandez, as your children are sitting in your car burning to death.
Oh my
None of this
God.
conversation, ladies and gentlemen, reflects any intention of I was blowing her up to let her know that I was in a hurry. Again, another lie the defendant tried to tell you. The defendant told you that Harmony was lying when she said the defendant told her that her phone was in the car because it was dead. What incentive, what reason does Harmony have to be untruthful about that? On the flip side, what incentive, what reason does defendant have to tell her that her phone's in the car because it's dead, rather than my phone is in the car because my kids are in there. Every incentive, because telling her that her kids have been in the car is her confessing to what she knew was a crime. Her confessing to something she knew was dangerous. Then she starts telling you she did not know it was bad to leave her kids in the car before she did it, only after. Completely inconsistent with her prior statement to Detective McNabb. Did not know it was dangerous to leave her kids in the car before she did it, only after. Didn't realize that detectives were asking her about what she knew beforehand. And then she says, I was just trying to take accountability. I was trying to take accountability for what I did. And ladies and gentlemen, you now know from her testimony and
You
from her
can't make
actions
this up.
that when she said, I was just trying to take accountability, what she meant was, I was trying to take accountability until I realized just what taking accountability would mean for me.
Yeah,
Again,
jail.
thinking about Maya. I was just trying to take accountability, and now here I am facing murder. That was a little bit more accountability than she thought she was signing up for. That was a little bit more accountability than she thought she was accepting when she made those initial statements to Detective McNabb. And you have those statements. We've already talked about them. But again, ladies and gentlemen, as I've been telling you, you are going to have to ask yourselves, what did she know and when did she know it? Those answers are going to come from her statements and her actions. Have you heard the radio ads about not leaving your kids in the car? What did you think could happen if you do leave them? Prior to this happening, did you understand? She answers in the affirmative. Yes, I knew prior to this happening. These are very clear questions, ladies and gentlemen. These questions were not random questions that Detective McNabb just came up with. You heard Detective McNabb. He is a seasoned detective. He knew the answers he was looking for, and he knew the questions he had to ask. He knew he needed to get the answers that she knew beforehand, she knew prior, which is why you hear it worded the way it was. Like, prior to this happening, did you understand? What did you think could happen? What happened, I guess? What happened to Amillio? Question mark. Did you know that prior to this happening? Not do you know that now? Not do you understand that or recognize it now? Did you know that prior to this happening? And she talks about having seen the news, having heard people, knowing it in general. She knows that it is wrong. She knows this in general because, as you heard from her mouth, as you heard from Dr. Masako, she is not an idiot. She knew it was wrong. She told you she knew it was wrong.
Cooked. She's really cooked.
Did you think about that when you were getting out of the car? Yeah. There is absolutely no way, ladies and gentlemen, to misunderstand this sentence as being something that was referring to what she understood in that moment. Did you think about that when you were getting out of the car? Yeah. I mean, if you knew that and you thought about it, what made you think it was okay to leave them? I don't know. She didn't say right here, I thought it was okay to leave them because I didn't think it was dangerous. She did not say, I thought it was okay to leave them because I did not think it was wrong. I don't know why I did it, because I knew it was wrong and I knew that beforehand. The questions were clear, the answers were clear. And these, ladies and gentlemen, are the answers that you need to make your decision during your deliberations. So let's talk about the defendant's interview versus her in-court testimony. During her interview, she knew what she did was irresponsible. She knew what she did was irresponsible before she left the kids in the car. She knew that leaving the kids in the car was dangerous. She knew leaving the kids in the car was dangerous before she made the decision to do it. She knew what happened to Amillio could happen if you leave kids in the car. And she knew that before she decided to leave the kids in the car. She knew the dangers of leaving kids in the car from hearing people talk about it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, consider the circumstances that those statements were made under. She knew something bad happened to Amillio. I apologize, this is Mateo. She had not been charged with any crimes yet. As she's sitting there with Detective McNabb, she does not know she's facing murder charges. She's not been charged with murder. She did not have a lawyer yet. She did not know the elements to murder. She didn't know the difference between murder to manslaughter to child abuse and neglect. She didn't know this case would revolve around what she knew and when she knew it. All she knew is something bad happened. They're asking me questions. I'm answering. I'm thinking I'm taking accountability. So let's talk about how that changed when she got to court and the circumstances yesterday. In court, she says she didn't know it was dangerous until after the fact. Must have misunderstood what the defendants were asking her. Ladies and gentlemen, that statement alone tells you got to ignore everything she said about that. Must have misunderstood. You saw the questions. You heard the questions. They were unambiguous questions. Didn't realize they were asking her about her knowledge before the incident. Prior to getting out of the car, prior to the incident, when you got out of the car, were you thinking about this? Those are not confusing statements, ladies and gentlemen. Was only saying that she knew it was dangerous after the fact. So let's talk about the circumstances that she made those statements under, ladies and gentlemen. She made those statements to you on December 15th, 2025. She made those statements to you during trial. She made those statements to you after she watched the entire trial. Opening statements, evidence. She made those statements to you after she had an attorney. She made those statements to you once she saw the people's opening, my opening, where I outlined to you everything required for second-degree murder implied malice, where I outlined that implied malice requires that she knows the actions are dangerous to human life before acting and did it anyway. She made these statements after she had that information. She made these statements in court after she heard her attorney say, just convict her of involuntary manslaughter. She didn't have the requisite knowledge. She made those statements yesterday after she knew that this case, that the difference between involuntary manslaughter and murder is going to rely solely upon what she knew and when she knew it. So now, ladies and gentlemen, you take all of those factors, the inconsistencies, the reasons that she has to lie, compare all of that to 226. Compare all of that to her prior statement.
She's getting roasted.
And the only thing that you're going to be able to do is determine that you have to ignore those statements because they were lies.
Oh,
They were made up to support her case. They were made up to help fit with the law as she had learned it by the time she made that statement. The reliable statements as to what she knew and when she knew it are the statements that she made the evening of June 29th, 2025, and during the day on July 3rd, 2025. So again, second-degree murder. The defendant committed an act that caused the death of Amillio. When the defendant acted, she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. She intentionally committed the act. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to find that this element's not going to be very contested by the defense.
oh,
This
Betty.
element is also required for involuntary manslaughter. The natural and probable consequence.
Y'all give it up for Petty Pendergrass, okay? Just at least one stream, just one time, just one time. There's always one where you look at it and you're like, Petty, Petty. Give it up for Petty Pendergrass, all right? Give it up for Petty. This is the one.
Of the act were dangerous to human life in that the act involved a high degree of probability that it would result in death. The act did not have a high probability that it would result in death. The act did result in death, ladies and gentlemen. The act in itself, leaving kids unattended in a car for 2.5 hours, has a high likelihood that death will result. And in this case, it did. At the time she acted, she knew the act was dangerous to human life. I knew what happened to Amillio could happen if I left them in the car. I knew it was irresponsible to leave them in the car. I knew what could happen to Amillio could happen, and I knew that before I left him there. I knew it was irresponsible to leave them in the car, and I considered that fact before I got out of the car. She deliberately acted with conscious disregard for human life. This means she knew the consequences, she knew the dangers, and she did it anyway. She knew it was dangerous to leave them in the car. She knew what could happen if she left them in the car, but she did it anyway. Failure to protect. The defendant had a legal duty to protect Amillio, and the defendant failed to perform that duty, and that failure caused the death of Amillio. When the defendant failed to act, she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. Implied malice, again, she intentionally committed the act. The natural and probable consequences of the act were dangerous to human life, in that the act involved a high degree of probability that it would result in death. Again, same elements. At the time she acted, she knew it was dangerous to human life. Those same statements from interviews 1 and 2 apply to this, ladies and gentlemen. She deliberately acted with conscious disregard for human life. She knew it was dangerous. She did it anyway. Again, malice aforethought does not require hatred or ill will towards the victim. It's okay that you heard that she loved her children. It's okay that she got emotional talking about the death of Amillio. It's okay that you saw the photographs of them at the pumpkin patch at the beach. She doesn't have to have ill will. She does not have to want Amillio to die. That is not a requirement for implied malice second-degree murder. Involuntary manslaughter. Again, the defendant committed a crime or a lawful act in an unlawful manner. The defendant committed the crime or act with criminal negligence. This is going to be one of the main differences. Criminal negligence versus implied malice. The defendant's acts caused the death of another person. A person acts with criminal negligence when he or she acts in a reckless way that creates a high risk of death or great bodily injury, i.e. leaving your 2 babies in the car for 2.5 hours so you can get a butt lift. And a reasonable person would have known that acting in that way could create such a risk. The difference between second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, ladies and gentlemen, is simply what did she know? Not what should she know, because everybody knows it, but what did she know? And the law actually tells you that. Specifically says the difference between second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter depends on whether the person was aware of the risk to life that her actions created and consciously disregarded that risk. That's the difference, ladies and gentlemen, between second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. And you have that answer from her statements to Detective McNabb, interview 1 and interview 2. You also have that answer from many of her actions. Not telling anybody her kids were in the car, not going to check on the kids, not knowing for certain whether or not her car would stay on. She knew. This difference, ladies and gentlemen, is met. This is not a case of involuntary manslaughter because of her knowledge. Her statements that she knew what could happen to Amillio could happen. Her statements that she knew it was irresponsible and she acted anyway. Her statements that she knew what could happen to Amillio. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, remember when you're considering that statement was made after she learned Amillio had passed. Her statement that she knew what happened to Amillio could happen and she knew it beforehand. And that she knew these dangers in general from hearing people talk about it, television ads, radio ads. Those statements, that knowledge is what gets you from involuntary manslaughter to second-degree murder. Again, just to highlight element 3 for implied malice murder. At the time she acted or failed to act, she knew her act or failure to act was dangerous to human life. Criminal negligence, a reasonable person. Again, in addition to the other statements, we have her statement to Rosendo. Of course, I knew it was wrong. I'm not an idiot. Or obviously I knew it was wrong. I'm not an idiot. I'm not an idiot, and I know that everybody knows this is wrong. I'm not an idiot, and you know she's not an idiot. Her statements to police officers in her first interview. I know it sounds stupid to say because I know it sounds stupid to say that I didn't mean it to happen because obviously I know it was wrong. You don't only have to look at the very specific statements where she says, I knew it was wrong, but those statements, I know it sounds.
She knew it was wrong, but she still went and got her BBL anyway. Left the kids in the car. Crazy.
Stupid to say. I know it sounds dumb. Those statements, ladies and gentlemen, also tell you that she knew it was wrong. Those statements tell you she knew it was wrong because she's telling them, I know I can sit up here all day and tell you that I didn't mean for it to happen. And I know how stupid that sounds because obviously I know it was wrong. Everybody knows it was wrong. Those statements, combined with the more specific statements, tell you that this is second-degree murder. This is just to highlight the subjective knowledge versus objective knowledge. Subjective knowledge, what did she know? Objective knowledge, what does the reasonable person know? What did she know versus what did the reasonable person know? She knew before confirming her BBL appointment for that location an hour away, days before the appointment. She knew she had somewhere to be on Sunday, June 29th. She knew her sister would watch the kids if she asked them to, but she didn't want to irritate her. She knew that she was driving from Bakersfield to Visalia with her 2 babies and no babysitter. She knew that leaving the children in the car was a bad decision. She knew it was irresponsible to leave them in a hot car unattended, and she knew that before she made the decision to do so. She knew it was hot outside. She knew the weather could cause her car to get hotter. She knew that even if she had left the AC on, as she wants you to believe, she knew that there were only vents in the front of the vehicle. What did she not know? That the air conditioner would stay on. She said she thought it would. She did not say she knew it would. She knew she could bring the kids inside, but decided not to. She knew she had the means to bring the kids inside. She had the double stroller. She knew it was going to be a wait because she knew the nurse was backed up. She knew there were people and kids in the waiting room before she ultimately left the kids in the car. She knew what she did was dangerous to human life, which is why she didn't ask about Amillio for over 30 minutes into the interview with detectives. She knew what she did was clearly a bad decision. She knew from radio ads and hearing from people that it was dangerous to leave your kids in the car. She knew about the danger and thought about that danger before she committed the act, before she left her kids in the car. She knew how to take care of people from her CNA training. In fact, you heard her favorite thing about her job was taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. Apparently, that only applied to patients and didn't extend to her own children, ladies and gentlemen. She knew what happened to Amillio could happen if she left her kids in the car. She knew that prior to leaving them in the car. She knew that these types of things happen and knew that before she made the choice to leave the babies. She knew damage could happen from leaving kids in a hot car. What does she know versus what the reasonable person knows, ladies and gentlemen? The same exact thing. And now you know that she knew her acts were dangerous to human life. You know that she knew this information before she acted and she did it anyway. You know from common sense, logical inferences that you are allowed to make that the reason she did not tell people she had her babies in the car with her was because it was wrong. She truly didn't think it was wrong and she thought everything was fine. Why not let everybody know, yeah, I got 2 babies. You want to come see them? They're in the car. They're so cute. You want to go look at them? Yeah, I got 2 babies. They're with me today. I don't leave home without them. I bring them everywhere. She didn't say anything like that because she knew her acts were wrong. She knew her acts were dangerous. What did you not hear in the defendant's 2 interviews? And ladies and gentlemen, I want to express to you that oftentimes, many times throughout my argument, I have told you this one little word, thought, either. One little word can tell you a lot. But sometimes the words you didn't hear can also tell you everything you need to know. What you did not hear during the defendant's 2 interviews, questions about why she was being arrested. She knew what she did was criminal. She knew it was wrong. She knew why she was being arrested. You did not hear any statements that what she did was a mistake. You did not hear any statements that what she did was an accident. You didn't hear any apologies from the defendant about the actions she did that day. You also didn't hear that in court when she testified. What you heard in court was excuses, justifications, attempts to get herself out of trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, we talked about this in voir dire. We don't get to take a screw and go into somebody's head, do an x-ray, and decide what they're thinking. And this is where the circumstantial evidence that we discussed and that you have in your instructions, circumstantial evidence of intent. How do we determine what somebody was intending, thinking, planning based upon their actions? And you get there by looking at what they did before, during, and after. So what did the defendant do beforehand that lets you know she's guilty of second-degree murder, implied malice? She chose to make her appointment in Bakersfield. She chose to bring her 2 babies with her. She knew she could bring the babies inside with her. She knew she had the means to control the babies inside of the business. She knew it was hot outside, knew it was irresponsible to leave the babies in the car, knew it was dangerous to leave the babies inside of the car. And before doing so, she knew that death could result. She did it anyway. During, what was going through her, what were her actions during the time period the babies were in the car that can give you some insight as to what was going on in her mind. After leaving the babies inside the car, she went into the business by herself. She sat there casually enjoying conversation for 2.5 hours. She never went to check on her babies. Rather, she socialized. She had some adult time. She had some carefree time with other adults. Told the other patrons that she had 2 little babies. Never mentioned that the babies were with her. Never told anyone that her babies were in the car. Never told anybody she was in a hurry. Never asked about what was taking so long. Never asked to be bumped up in the line. What did she do after? Well, afterwards, she knew immediately upon getting to her car that something was wrong with Amillio. She didn't call 911 for approximately 6 to 7 minutes after, 4:40 p.m. After she had gotten out of her car, started to walk into the business with Amillio and went back to her car with Amillio. She then went to her car and, according to Isabel, was just essentially bouncing the baby up and down on her lap, not screaming for help, not frantic, not showing any sense of urgency. She sat in her car with Amillio until Isabel saw her and told her to go get him some help. She told detectives that she knew it was irresponsible and dangerous.
I didn't know about this.
She Snapchatted her sister. He's dead. I left him in the car, Kayla. I know he's dead. I left him in the car, Kayla. I know he's dead. That statement also tells you she knew the danger.
Where do we vote?
Because she knew all she had to say was, I left him in the car.
Can we vote now?
She didn't say, I left him in the car, but the AC was running. I have no idea how this happened.
She admitted it. What's the
He's
defense?
dead. I left him in the car, Kayla. I know he's dead. Didn't ask about Amillio for 30 to 40 minutes into the interview.
Oh my God.
Told detectives that she knew it was irresponsible and dangerous before she did it.
Can we just vote? Put her in jail.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence that you have has proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the elements, not only for implied malice, second-degree murder act committed, but also second-degree murder failure to act. Again, the statements to Detective McNabb tell you what you need to know to bump you from involuntary manslaughter to second-degree murder.
She wants to hire.
She deliberately acted with conscious disregard for human life.
She wants to hire.
It sounds stupid for me to say like, oh, like I didn't mean for that to happen. Cause like I did leave them, but I thought they were going to be okay. It sounds stupid for me to say I thought they were going to be okay. It sounds stupid for me to say that because we all know, everybody knows, Maya Hernandez, know that that's dangerous. And I did it anyway. She knew leaving them was a bad decision. She knew leaving them in the car was dangerous before she got out of the car. And she did it anyway.
She's cooked.
With the knowledge that her actions were dangerous. With the knowledge that her actions were dangerous to human life. With the knowledge that her actions, leaving the kids in the car, could result in death. She did it anyway. This is conscious disregard for human life, ladies and gentlemen.
Get cooked.
Count 3 is 273 AA for Amillio. This is child abuse likely to result in great bodily harm or injury. Requires that the defendant, while having care or custody of a child, willfully caused or permitted the child be placed in a situation where the child's person or health was endangered. The defendant inflicted pain or suffering on the child or caused or permitted the child to suffer, be injured, or be endangered under circumstances or conditions likely to produce great bodily harm or death. The defendant was criminally negligent when she caused or permitted the child to suffer, be injured, or be endangered. I don't anticipate much argument on this charge, ladies and gentlemen. The defendant admitted to these actions. She admitted to all of these elements. Count 4 is the same charge for Mateo, same elements. An important part to the instruction for this charge for Mateo is that you will see at the bottom of the instruction for 273 AA, I believe it's Calcrim 821, is going to tell you that a child does not need to actually suffer great bodily harm. It's okay that Mateo was okay because the circumstances were likely to cause the great bodily harm or death. The fact that he was okay does not negate these elements. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to conclude my argument today. I will have one more chance to get up and respond to the comments that the defense makes for you. That will not be nearly as lengthy as this, I can guarantee you that. But I want to leave you with 2 things that I left you with in the beginning of the case during my opening statement. This case is not about accidents or mistakes. The defendant did not accidentally leave her children in the car. She did not forget they were there. She wasn't thrown for her schedule for the day and missed a stop. The defendant purposefully, willfully, and intentionally left her children in the car. And she did so knowing what could happen. And she did it anyway. This is a case of choices. Choices made by the defendant. Choices that had bad outcomes. Choices that the defendant now needs to be held accountable for. And you, ladies and gentlemen, as the jury, you get to be the ones to hold her accountable for the death of Amillio. And you get to do that by coming back into this courtroom after deliberations and returning a guilty verdict of second-degree murder for the death of Amillio. Thank you for your time and your attention to this matter.
Chat. Listen, that's got to be my favorite closing argument of the year. Listen, we've had a lot. And this is an open and shut case, Johnson. All right. This is an open and shut. Okay. This girl is guilty. And I usually, you know me, I like to wait and all of that. She is guilty. She left her children in a hot car while she went to get a BBL. And then she tried to be slick on Snapchat and they were able to retrieve that message. She knew exactly what she was doing. So now it's up to a jury, right? So this is all taking place today, right? These closing arguments are taking place right now. And I think the jury is currently in deliberation. I have a poll up for y'all. How long will it take the jury to deliberate? Less than an hour is at 30%. 1 hour is at 34%. More than 1 hour is 26%. More than 1 day is at 10%. Luckily, I'm going to be able to skip ahead and we're going to see what the hell the defense is going to say. What do you say? What do you say? And then think about it. They put a pregnant prosecutor up there to do the closing arguments. California cares about its children. So let's see what happens here and keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Coney. Mr. Wakeman, would you like to start at 1:30? I would. Okay, for the jury, we're going to resume at 1:30. Remember, closing arguments aren't evidence. They're important for you to hear what each side has to say. And then obviously it's not time to deliberate, discuss the case, et cetera. We'll see you back at 1:30. We'll be all set up for Mr. Wakeman.
All right. So they took a brief break. I have TiVo time. So I can skip through. Actually, it was a long break. It looks like that this is where they took their lunch break. That's why I love starting later. They pick it up right here. Let's see what she has to say for herself. What is the defense going to say? How are they going to argue? I saw God's blessing that Alan Jackson is the lawyer for Nick.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We'll talk about that in a second.
I'm going to start out by
Listen
cutting to the chase.
bullshit.
There's no implied malice for count one. Maya thought the air conditioning system would stay on. Is there an alternate scenario where you would have a fact pattern similar to this where there would be implied malice? Yeah, there sure could be. If a person in a similar situation would have just walked in to the office or to the spa and did nothing else, then yeah, you could have implied malice in that situation, but that isn't the situation here. So the way that we're going to move through this is I have some preliminary matters that I want to go over with you, very brief. We're going to review the charges. We're going to talk about counts 2, 3, and 4 being conceded. We're going to unpack why there's no implied malice. I'm going to show you why Maya is not guilty of count 1. I'll have a little bit of rebuttal at the end. I worked some of it through over lunch, but there's a little bit that I just didn't get to make a slide for. So we'll finish up with some rebuttal and then I'll have some closing remarks. So preliminary matters. The jury instructions is the law in this case that's been given to you by the judge. They're called CalCrim and each one has a number. As I move through my presentation, I'll do my best to cite you to those CalCrim numbers. Just as a reference, you'll have them all. If you want to write it down, you can. If you don't, certainly no obligation there. Basically, the jury instructions are self-contained, they're self-guiding. They tell you what to do and they tell you how to do it. The way that I like to look at it is this. Crimes have elements. Each element of a crime has to...
Just pack it up. Look at this fucking outfit. She's so cooked. He just said he was making slides during lunch. She's so cooked. Y'all thought Alicia was cooked? Listen. Look at the tie. It's off to the side. The belt hanging. Chat, she's done. There ain't no way. You ain't gonna beat this. Maya, it's over. I'm telling you right now. I sound like academics. But Maya, it is over. If this is your public defender, ain't no wedding ring because he worked too much and he obviously sits in a chair for a long time. I am not fat shaming, but God damn it, she is cooked.
Be proven as required by the jury instruction for that crime. And the way that I like to think about it is this. I compare it to a recipe. Elements for a given crime are like ingredients for a given recipe. Just like you would make a cake, just like you would make a crime. You have the elements, you have the ingredients.
Why does this come up in every closing argument? Beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, lambs. Every closing argument.
Now, there's a key point that I want to start with about the union of act and intent, and it's found in CalCrim, and it's this. The offenses in this case require proof of the union or joint operation of act and wrongful intent. What that means is that you've got to have a guilty act and a guilty mind at the same time, okay? Guilty act and a guilty mind at the same time. If I'm standing here in front of you today and I'm thinking about robbing a bank, I'm thinking about robbing a bank, but I'm not robbing a bank, am I? I'm here in front of you all. So there's no act. I may or may not have a guilty mind, but there's no crime, okay? It works both ways. Guilty act, guilty mind. The reason I bring that to your attention is because when we get to count one, it becomes important, this idea of the union of act and intent. So let's move into some substance. We're going to begin by reviewing the charges in the case. Count one is the second-degree murder for Amillio. That's at 520. That's a felony. Count two is the invol for Amillio. That is conceded. Count three is child endangerment / death for Amillio. That is also conceded. And count four is child endangerment. That is for Mateo, and that is conceded. Now, it was suggested to you that Ms. Hernandez was not taking accountability. On her behalf, I stood up in court in an opening statement, and I conceded 3 felonies. It's hard to get more accountable than that. And I hope that landed, because what I was telling you in open statement and what I'm telling you now is that, yeah, you can find her guilty for 2, 3, and 4. That's what I meant when I was conceding it. That's pretty accountable. So the question then becomes, okay, if this guy's conceding 2, 3, and 4, why talk about it? Why talk about the ones you're conceding? Well, there are 3 reasons, okay? Reason number 1 is because the jury instruction for involuntary manslaughter references the difference between invol and second-degree murder. The second reason is that the child endangerment jury instruction references involuntary manslaughter, and there are mental states that we have to talk about, so they reference each other. But this is really the reason. The reason is I'm reviewing these conceded counts with you and their requisite mental state because I think that it provides insight as to why they fit in this situation and count 1 does not fit in this situation. So let's start to get into a rhythm, okay? These are our ingredients. We're talking about count 2, involuntary manslaughter. The first ingredient is a crime or a lawful act in an unlawful manner. That's the first ingredient. You'll notice the or between crime and lawful. It's in the disjunctive. Both are alleged and both apply here. I'm conceding that count. Second ingredient, committed with criminal negligence. You may notice that criminal negligence is in all caps. I'm trying to draw your attention to it, okay? That's the first mental state. It also happens to be the mental states for 3 and 4, but this is the first time we're seeing it here. I'm conceding it. Third element, cause the death of another person. Yes, for Amillio, okay? All of the elements for this charge are met. This charge is conceded. But we are not done with CalCrim 580. We're not done with it. CalCrim 580 has more to say. In 2 places, 580 defines the difference between second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. Second full paragraph and last full paragraph. And 580 defines criminal negligence in 2 different places as well, okay? That would be paragraphs 6 and 8 by my count. If you want to go back there and say it's 7 and 9, there's a lot of little one-liners. It depends upon, I guess, how you do your counting. But that'll get you to the neighborhood, okay? This is also important. There's 3 parts that we're going to go through here. Part 1, criminal negligence involves more than ordinary carelessness, inattention, or mistaken judgment. And then it tells you, a person acts with criminal negligence when 1 and 2. He or she acts in a reckless way, and I'm going to be bringing you back to reckless. He or she acts in a reckless way that creates a high risk of death or GBI, and a reasonable person would have known that acting in that way would create such a risk. Part 2, and this is the jury instruction quote. This is their
Of course, am I freezing? Okay, sorry, I was freezing for a little bit. I was saying he needs to be careful for a second because when he says things like GBI, I know that that means great bodily injury, but I do think that he does need to spell it out for the jury a little bit more. I mean, some of you guys are like, hey, he's actually doing pretty decent in this close. I think so too, you know, so we'll see because at the end of the day, he knows that she's cooked. So the best he can do is get her something like one of the lesser included, right? Let's keep going.
Language, obviously not mine. This is a quote, not a paraphrase. In other words, a person acts with criminal negligence when the way he or she acts is so different from the way that an ordinarily careful person would act in the same situation that his or her act amounts to disregard for human life or indifference to the consequences of that act. Third definition. You've already seen this. This was in Mr. Coney's presentation as well. Obviously, if we're both including it, it's important, right? In order to prove second-degree murder, the people have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant acted with conscious disregard. So for all of this, it comes down to those two words. So I would like you to keep the definition of criminal negligence in mind as we keep moving through counts 3 and 4. You'll notice at the bottom there's a little reference. That's for both of us. It keys me to where I need to go, and it kind of lets you know where we're going to. So let's move to count 3. Count 3 is child endangerment for Amillio. Okay, and it has 3 elements, 3 ingredients. First element, the defendant, while having care or custody of a child, willfully caused or permitted the child to be placed in a situation where the child's person or health was endangered. I would ask you to pay particular attention right there to care or custody, because that's going to relate to Maya as a mom, okay? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how count 2 and 3 get to the same place factually, maybe, but in a legally different way, okay? Because they have different ingredients. I'm conceding the first element. The first element is met. The second element is the defendant inflicted pain or suffering on the child or caused or permitted the child to suffer, be injured, I missed a comma, or be endangered under circumstances or conditions likely to produce GBI. It's obviously the latter part of that in this case. This element is met. Third element, look what we have again. Criminally negligent. The defendant was criminally negligent when she caused or permitted the child to suffer, be injured, or endangered. This element is met. This charge is conceded. I didn't run through this again with Mateo. With one difference, these elements apply for Mateo in count 4. I'll summarize that for you in the next slide. The mental state here, again, is criminal negligence. So if we're summarizing this for 3 and 4, Maya was the mother of both, had care and custody of both, did not check up on them. Proof requirements are met as to both, with the only difference being that count 3 includes Amillio's death, and thankfully counts 3 and 4 are conceded.
So he's definitely a public defender. I've verified that. His name is Terrell. Terrell here is doing his best, and the judge looks like a mannequin. Oh, what was the mannequin from the Karen Reed case? What was that mannequin's name? Rescue Randy has entered the oh, it's Rescue Randy, chat. Rescue Randy is the judge. Oh my God, Rescue Randy is making an appearance on the stand, on the bench in a robe. It is Rescue Randy, and this is interesting. So what's happening right now, he's hoping to get her some of the lesser included charges. And guess how old she is. So as I'm doing some fact finding on the other screen over here, the defendant is only 20 years old, Chad. 20 years old. I can't believe how young she is, but 20 years old with 2 kids and prioritizing a BBL instead of child safety is crazy.
So here's what I want to bring to your attention. Count 3 and the invol in 2 get to a similar place, but they have a different ingredient, and that is the care, custody, and control. Because otherwise, you could never, if this were a situation where it wasn't your kid and you didn't have care, custody, and control of the kid, you wouldn't be able to get them unless you had the invol. You see what I mean? So different elements apply to different crimes, and different acts and elements differentiate crimes. That's kind of how the law covers things, if that makes sense. So keep in mind that counts 2, 3, and 4 all involve criminal negligence. These are the mental states of the conceded counts. Why is this important? It's important because count 1 is a specific intent crime. And I'll reference 252 and 520 for you. We're switching gears here. The other reason that it's important is because count 1 requires proof of implied malice. Now, as we start to move into this, we're going to be talking about count 1. Excuse me. You're going to see that some of these definitions start to get nested, right? So you'll have 3 ingredients, but then an ingredient will have ingredients of its own, if that makes sense. So dealing with count 1 now, we're going to use the same methodology as we did before with counts 2, 3, and 4. We're going to review the law. We're going to review the facts. But this is a deeper dive now because count 1 is not being conceded. Count 1 is second-degree murder. To prove that the defendant is guilty of this crime, the people must prove, here comes the recipe, 1A, the defendant committed an act that caused the death of another person. We have another disjunctive there with an or. 1B, the defendant had a legal duty to care for Amillio, and the defendant failed to perform that duty, and that failure caused the death of Amillio. Now we get to the and. In between 1B and 2, there's an and. And you'll see that I've highlighted malice of forethought. This one is in the conjunctive.
Can you?
Malice of forethought is required to prove count 1. Without it, count 1 fails for lack of proof. So we're dialing down now on malice of forethought. Let's get the legal definition. And once we do that, we'll talk about why the facts don't support that element in this case, okay? This is probably my biggest, deepest slide, okay? Implied malice is defined with 4 elements, 4 ingredients, but what I'm gonna do is draw your attention to the fact that it says she.
Come on, camera.
Check this out.
I want to see. Come on,
That's the
camera
guts of what
man.
matter in this, okay? Element 3, you see where it says at the time? And then you see where it says Maya. For element 3, at the time, Maya acted or failed to act. Maya knew her act or failure to act was dangerous to human life. And Maya deliberately acted with conscious disregard. 2 words, conscious disregard. So there's some takeaways. Number 1, second-degree murder is a specific intent crime. We talked about that a moment ago. Takeaway number 2, no conscious disregard, then no second-degree murder. That's what the and is for. That's what that means. So let's talk about some facts. You, as the jury, decide the facts. Facts are based on evidence. Evidence comes from testimony, exhibits, and what the judge tells you to consider as evidence. Pretty straightforward. There are 3 categories of witnesses in this case. These categories are mine, okay? I had to break it up somehow. This is how I chose to break it up. Category number 1 is civilian witnesses. Number 2 is law enforcement. And number 3 is medical witnesses. This is a small universe of facts, okay? I would agree with that. And count 1 is going to turn on how you apply the law, okay? So, civilian witnesses, you heard each one of those people testify. Law enforcement witnesses, there were a lot, so I broke those down into 2 categories. Again, my categories. I called it foundational and substantive. The foundational people were the people that had to well, you can't define a word with a word, but they were the people that had to talk about what they did because other people relied on what they did. Okay, so they had to kind of lay the groundwork for it. And then the substantive. Those were the foundational folks. Those were the substantive law enforcement folks. And then last, I had the medical witnesses. I put medical and not expert. You guys can deal with that. You have all the witnesses. Those are designations. That's just how I grouped it. Okay. I am not going to summarize each witness. There were a lot of foundation witnesses. We just saw that, and that's fine. I'm not going to summarize those folks at all. As we move through this, I'm going to ask you to take a look at and consider facts versus emotions and what really moves the needle, okay? I'm going to address what I think are key areas of testimony, and I'm going to start with the recreation. The recreation as presented, the methodology was flawed, it was outdated, the variables that were present on June the 29th were not accounted for in the recreation, and it was based on a study from 20 years ago. Now, if the idea is that cars in the sun get hot, I believe that. I think that's common knowledge. Cars in the sun get hot. Well, oops, sorry. What I don't think, though, is that the recreation is accurate because it didn't match the conditions that were experienced. The whole purpose of science is repeatability. Otherwise, what are we doing? Now, counts 2, 3, and 4 are conceded in any event. I have some rebuttal points that I would like to make. I think that comparing a child's reaction to heat and a camera's reaction to heat isn't realistic at all. I question why the recreation didn't use a thermometer for the outside air temperature if it was so complete. But again, those temperatures are those temperatures. If the air conditioning worked for law enforcement, a few days later,
Back it
the
up.
AC worked for Maya.
Back it up.
And
I mean, that's really what I said, y'all. I know I was muted, but I was just like, man, what? Just pack it up.
it was asserted that Maya never bothered to read her car's owner's manual. She must be the only one.
Also, the car is a Corolla. So I have done a little bit of digging on that. It looks like, forget what year, but it is a Toyota Corolla hybrid, right? It does turn off after an hour if the action is taken. We don't know what year it is quite yet, but it is a Toyota Corolla hybrid. Let's go back in.
I don't think she is the only one. I think a lot of people just get in their car and drive it. Now, for the spa witnesses, we had the nurse, the nurse's assistant, and 2 patrons, and I would agree this affected them. It would affect anyone. But none of them can say what was in Maya's mind when she came in. When she was in there, they can absolutely describe her behavior. There's no foul there. But you heard testimony that they thought that she was going to run out. They thought she was going to dine and dash on the BBL. So take that for what you will.
Diamond
If
Dash.
people can read other people's nonverbal cues, it isn't that surprising that someone would be cautious because we all send signals to each other.
Hold on, stop. So the med spa thought she was going to run out and not pay for her BBL. Why does the story just keep getting worse?
Some good, some bad, some friendly, some mad, etc. For the medical witnesses, Dr. Riley was the ER doc. Dr. Glenisi testified that there were no abrasions, bruises, lacerations, scars, or burn marks. We had the 2 nurses that testified from the ER. I'll come back to Musako down the road. Just like with the civilians in the spa, the treating medical professionals testified that they were affected. Yeah, they're human. Anyone would be. But when it's suggested to you that Dr. Riley tried everything, well, what else is he going to do? He's not going to come up here and say that he tried 3/4 to save someone. So facts and emotion, what moves the needle? Not saying the guy did a bad job at all. What I'm saying is it's okay that he is upset with this. Anyone would be. But when he comes and says, we tried everything, well, yeah, of course you did. I'm glad you did, but of course you did. So let's move to Maya, first interview. There were 2 interviews. They were done by Detectives McNabb and Jordan. Each interview speaks for itself. You have the video. You will have the video. Maya taking accountability doesn't equal conscious disregard. Those are different concepts. Maya thought the AC would stay on, that she said that in the first interview. She didn't know the car would turn off. She left the fob under the seat. She left cookies, bottles, a fruit roll-up, an iPhone for Mateo, and she left them in car seats. That's what she testified to. She also said she never read the manual. She bought it and she started driving it. So again, do with that what you will. You already heard the 911 call, and I hope you'll listen to it again. That call was frantic. Listen to her voice in that call.
Who's the fruit roll up for? How's he gonna open it? You have tiny kids. Like, that's how you can tell this girl was just really young. As she was in that med spa getting her BBL, you have a 1-year-old where they really don't know where their nose is. You know, like they need a lot of care. They need a lot of help. And a 2-year-old, you think he just gonna figure it out? Like, just open it. And like he knows how to open a fruit roll. Those are hard to open if you're little. She left him with a fruit roll up. Each one had a bottle. Like, let me go inside and get these ass injections. I'll come back. Leave the AC on, put the key under, and hopefully the car stays on. Man,
She tried to ride in the ambulance and she was not allowed.
I bet.
When the DA crossed Maya, counts 2, 3, and 4 were proven. And I also said, to be fair to the DA, you know, she has to meet her burden of proof, right? That's the law. She has to meet her burden of proof, but we're conceding 2, 3, and 4. My point is, Maya was criminally negligent. That much is clear. Her behavior was absolutely more than ordinary carelessness, inattention, or mistaken judgment. She was reckless in a way that created a high risk of death, or GBI, and a reasonable person would have known that acting in that way would create such a risk. That's why this is involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. That's exactly why it is. Maya didn't know time of death for Amillio. Maya tried to call CPR. Maya tried CPR on the 911 call with the assistance from the dispatcher. If Maya knew when she Snapchatted her sister that Amillio was dead, why ask McNabb? It's hyperbole. It's what we always engage in, right? Oh my gosh, he's dead, right? Maya asked the guards and they didn't know. Maya's reaction was one of emotional shock per Dr. Musako. I had to do that. I had to call him to get his opinion on that. But is that really surprising? I'm not trying to minimize my own expert, but I don't just get to say stuff. I have to give you a basis. That'd be like the recreation.
Shut up. Look at his last sentence. Maya did everything right as soon as she could. Maya did everything right as soon as she could. Maya did everything right as soon as she could. You could tell this is a public defender, child. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 things, right? Maya did everything right as soon as she could. You're making a mockery of this. She didn't know the time of death. Okay, it doesn't matter if she didn't know, she still put him in a position where he could have died. She tried CPR by turning the baby upside down to see if he can breathe, bringing him inside and still bouncing him on her knee to see if he can breathe. The medical staff inside said, "No, ma'am, you need to call for help." There was no rush. If Maya knew when she Snapchatted her sister, why ask McNabb? She knew when she Snapchatted her sister because she typed the words, "He's dead." The hell are you talking about? Maya asked the guards and they didn't know. Oh my God, what a way to end 2025. And there's still more to go this week.
I have to say, hey,
I know you're not laughing.
this is an expert. These are the tests that he
Did he
performed.
giggle?
This is his opinion.
Did he giggle? Chat. Let me go back. Did he giggle? I know he didn't giggle.
That Amillio was dead. Why ask McNabb? It's hyperbole. It's what we always engage in, right? Oh my gosh, he's dead, right? Maya asked the guards and they didn't know. Maya's reaction was one of emotional shock per Dr. Musako. I had to do that. I had to call him to get his opinion on that. But is that really surprising? I'm not trying to minimize my own expert, but I don't just get to say stuff. I have to give you a basis. That'd be like the recreation. I have to say, hey, this is an expert. These are the tests that he performed. This is his opinion on this case. The point here is that Maya did everything right as soon as she could. So let's get there.
As soon as she could.
Count one is not proven, and here is why. Under 252, the specific intent crime of second-degree murder requires the joint operation of wrongful act and wrongful intent. Under Cal Crim 520, when Maya acted or failed to act, Maya did not have the required state of mind of malice aforethought. Implied malice is the type of malice here, and implied malice requires conscious disregard. That's what's missing in this case. Conscious disregard is missing because Maya thought the air conditioner would stay on. And this is true no matter how you factor in 252, okay? You have that union of act and intent, right? Act. Let's go back to the definition of implied malice for a moment. At the time Maya acted, Maya knew her act or failure to act was dangerous to human life, and Maya deliberately acted or failed to act with conscious disregard. So we are at the time language here. Scenario number one. Maya left the AC on and the fob under the seat. She left the cookies, she left the candy, she left them in the car seats, etc. But she left the AC on and the fob under the seat when she went into the office for the procedure. She was conscious of the heat and did the opposite of disregarding. That's why Maya left the AC on in the first place. Now I'm going to back up for one slide because I want to bring to your attention, this is what you guys are going to have to talk about, the at the time, because you're the deciders. And that's why I gave you scenario number one. That's when Maya left the AC on, fob under the seat, and went into the office for the procedure. Scenario number two, when Maya was sitting in the lobby, Maya thought the AC in the car was on while she was sitting in there. Should Maya have checked on them? Yes. Parents should check on their kids. What do we call parents who don't check on their kids? We call them negligent. And in this case, criminally negligent. But here's the real distinction for conscious disregard, okay? This is the distinction for conscious disregard. To really get there, remember at the beginning I told you about this, the alternate scenario about the person who just walks in and does nothing, right? Okay? This is another one. The prosecution, to really get there, would have to prove that Maya knew the car would time out. See, you're hearing about this hot car, hot car, hot car. Okay? But that's not it. Okay? Hot car, hot car, hot car means that if you're the parent that just walks in and leaves them in a hot car, you're consciously disregarding. That was that alternate scenario, the first one. But this one is hot car, hot car, hot car. Maya knows that it's hot and hot car, so she turns on the AC, thinking it's going to keep running. So in order to get her for conscious disregard, they would have to prove that Maya knew the car would time out and then went in anyway. The point isn't that Maya didn't know that leaving a kid in a hot car is risky. She did. That's why she left the AC on. What she didn't know is that it would turn off. Maya thought she mitigated the risk. And this is true whether she's walking away or sitting in the lobby. For your at the time decision, this is true either way because she thought the AC was on. She was wrong, tragically. The mental state in count one is subjective. I'm not going to burn you all the way back to that slide, but it was the blue Maya. The mental state in the conceded counts 2, 3, and 4 is criminal negligence. And it's guided by the way Those crimes are defined in the instructions. They fit better on these facts. She was reckless. She was reckless to trust a machine. That's it. Do you trust your kid's life to a machine? That's reckless. But yet you do. You trust them to cars. You trust them to baby monitors. You trust your kid with a lot of machines, but you also check on your kid. Okay? Count 1 is a specific intent crime, and the definition of implied malice requires conscious disregard. Conscious disregard has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt in this case. 2, 3, and 4 have been conceded, but there's no conscious disregard. Therefore, there's no count 1. Reasonable doubt leaves you with an abiding conviction that the charge is true. You have to believe in this case with an abiding conviction that there was conscious disregard. And you can't get there. Maya thought the risk was mitigated. That's really what it is. They would have to prove that she knew that the car would time out. And there's nothing about that in this case. Now I have some rebuttal here, and then I'll go into my closing remarks. My apologies for how I do this. You were told that this case turns on not what did she know and when did she know it. That depends on the count. That depends on the count and the mental state. You were told that she made statements that were not consistent with the car running because the car turns off and she didn't know that. And finally, it was asserted to you that she didn't tell any of the patrons in the spa about the kids because she knew she couldn't get in trouble. She wasn't in.
Pack it. Look at the face. Pack it up. When you are doing a closing argument, notice that the last woman, she did have some like notes and things like that. He's literally reading off of a notepad. He did say that it would be rebuttal. Okay. So I'll give him that. This is kind of pretty much last minute cobbled together off of the dome. You know, like he's in a booth spitting a hot 16.
Trouble then. And if she was there,
Wrote
and
it.
she thought that the AC was on, that makes sense. So, accountability is a main purpose of the criminal law. But holding someone accountable means calling an act exactly what it is, not more and not less. This is my final opportunity to speak to you on behalf of Maya Hernandez. Okay? This is it. Be done in a minute. Human nature often pushes us into this idea of, well, whoever gets the last word wins, right? Because this is, after all, called argument, isn't it? So I don't get the last word. The DA has the last word, but that's because they also have the burden. They have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm asking you to find Maya Hernandez not guilty of count 1. Her conduct was clearly criminally negligent. That is what I said to you within the first 2 or 3 sentences the first time I spoke to you. And that's what I'm saying to you now. Her conduct was criminally negligent. But there is no implied malice in this case. And this is definitely not second-degree murder. So, thank you all very much for listening.
That's it. Oh, Helena, I've missed you. Helena, Toyota Corolla hybrid. She prioritized the vents in the front seat when she got out of the car, left the key fob in the car, had it at 80 degrees. But again, the airflow wasn't going back to the children. Okay, to your point, it was up front. But that's it. That was his closing. I mean, if you're on the jury, court of public opinion, shout out to Scrambling and Scraping. Do you know that 50 Cent posted that today? I was like, oh, it's the Scrambling and Scraping clip. Like he posted that today. It was hilarious. Anyway, I got distracted because I saw Scrambling and Scraping, but this is pretty bad. Now, I will give him this point. This could be attractive to a jury. Can we convict her on count 1 when she's conceding to 2, 3, and 4, right? Because malice aforethought. That's what we can deliberate on. Maybe that's where we spend our time. If she's conceding on those other things, she's saying, yeah, involuntary manslaughter, yeah, negligence when it comes to children, child negligence, you have that. And she has a count for each child because there's two, right? This is a 20-year-old that prioritized a BBL, right? The other thing that's interesting is she had an Apple Watch the whole time, right? She was wearing an Apple Watch, so she absolutely could have gotten back to the car. I mean, I really did, especially with the strollers in the back, she could have just popped them in and brought her in with her appointment. But at the same time, I'm learning so much from you guys. When you get a BBL, I guess there's a healing process. Sometimes it leaks. I don't know, because this was a liquid BBL, but there are pillows I guess you can buy to drive after you have your BBL for comfort. So, I don't know. Like, it's just exactly. Just don't leave your kids in the damn car. There was a man at the clinic who went out to his car to get his dog, and you could see the dog in the surveillance footage inside of the clinic. He brought his dog in, and she still sat there. She made conversations with people. Like, she watched somebody else's kid. They were like, oh, do you mind watching my daughter for a minute? She watched somebody else's kid. Meanwhile, her kids are in the back seat of this tiny car. It's just so bad. Yes, and the BBL was on a payment plan, and they thought, I think Gray had pointed it out. They thought that because she said, my phone is in the car, let me go get it, and I'll come back and check out and pay, right? And she was on a payment plan for her BBL. She had made some payments like an hour and 40 minutes late for her appointment. It was just a whole mess. A whole mess. We're going to go to prosecution rebuttal. It is 7:00 Eastern Standard Time, about 4:00 on the Pacific West Coast. So I will see where they are with deliberations, but the jury is currently deliberating. I don't think this is going to be a long one. I have given you guys some options in our poll. How long will the jury deliberate? 25% of you say less than an hour. 28% of you say 1 hour. 35% say more than an hour, and those guys have it because we are more than an hour. And then 12% on more than a day. I have local news up here in the California area to see if we have any updates. But let us go to the prosecution's rebuttal at this point and see what's happening.
Wakeman.
Here we go.
Do you need a minute to get set up?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I think microphone will have to switch.
I gotcha.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I indicated before lunch, I'm going to keep this brief.
And again, for those that are coming in, this is the prosecutor. They put a pregnant prosecutor in front of this jury to really talk about the heinousness and the nature of this crime, right? Okay, you're conceding to counts 2, 3, and 4, but 1 is important because in California, in one of the hottest places in America, when it comes to the summer, they really want to reduce what happens when people leave their children in cars. They want to make an example of this girl, but will the jury agree is the question. But again, let's go and see what Stephanie Taccone is her name. We'll see what Prosecutor Taccone has to say here for a rebuttal.
This is going to be not only shorter than my initial closing argument, but I promise I will keep this shorter than Mr. Wakeman's. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant does not get extra points because her attorney came in here and conceded some counts. She does not get extra points because Mr. Wakeman just got up and said she'll take accountability. She's saying she's guilty of criminal negligence. She's saying counts 2, 3, and 4 have been proved. That does not get extra points. That is not a show of accountability. Perhaps a show of manipulation, but not a show of accountability. Yesterday, when you heard from the defendant, when she had an opportunity to speak for herself, she didn't take accountability. She gave denials. She told you lies. She does not get to get extra credit or extra points because her attorney is conceding counts on her behalf. It's convenient, though, ladies and gentlemen, if you pay attention, that the 3 counts that are being conceded by the defense are counts that they cannot rebut. They're counts that the defendant herself could not get up here and challenge. And that's because they are counts that rely on the physical evidence you saw in this case. And they're counts that rely on how you would behave and how you would act in a scenario. They're not doing some great deed by conceding counts that they know they cannot contest. So sure, let's challenge the charge that has my mental state at issue, and I'll talk to them about that. We'll get to that a little bit more in a couple minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard a lot from Mr. Wakeman about not checking on her kids, being criminally negligent, essentially being a bad mom. You heard that she thought the air conditioner would stay on. She thought it would stay on, therefore she's not guilty of murder. But again, what you never heard is she knew it would stay on. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a scenario where the defendant left the children for 10, 15, 30, even 60 minutes. She left that car for 2.5 hours with no actual knowledge that the air conditioner would stay on. And ladies and gentlemen, this notion of the air conditioner being on and the thought that the air conditioner would stay on while she was in the business is only based upon her statement. That evidence only comes by way of the defendant's statements to law enforcement and the defendant's statements in court. Look at that with caution, because this defendant is somebody who has already showed you that she will take the stand and be dishonest to get herself out of trouble. Everything the defense relies on in this case has to do with the defendant's statements. Something was very interesting just now from Mr. Wakeman's closing argument. And I said during my initial argument that sometimes what you don't hear can be as important or even more important as what you do hear. Yesterday, we heard from the defendant, and it was all about, I didn't know it was dangerous at the time. I didn't know it was bad at the time. I didn't know it was irresponsible at the time. You didn't hear Mr. Wakeman mention any of that, ladies and gentlemen, because that testimony didn't work out very well for her. You can consider that. Sometimes what is not said can be even more important than what is said. Mr. Wakeman knew he could not get up here in good conscience and argue to you her testimony from yesterday, because even he knows that they are dishonest statements, just like you know that.
Your Honor, I'm going to object in proper argument.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the attorneys are commenting on the evidence, not on each other. Go ahead.
Involuntary manslaughter has been conceded, as you heard from Mr. Wakeman. You also heard the only thing different between involuntary manslaughter and second-degree murder is what the defendant was thinking, what she knew, and her conscious disregard for human life. 2.5 hours without checking on her children who were in a car. Sure, she said she thought the air conditioner would stay on. She never confirmed that. Ladies and gentlemen, had the defendant, Amillio and Mateo's mother, given her children so much thought that day as to go check on them once every 30 minutes, we would not be here today. Had the defendant, the children's mother, given her children enough thought that day to go check on them every 30 minutes, Amillio would still be alive. The fact that she thought the air conditioner was running.
Man, this prosecutor's cooking. For those that are coming in, the reason why this is titled this way is a young woman, 20 years old. I believe she's Mexican, had served 5 months in jail already, had 2 of her kids in the back of her car, and is on trial right now because she went inside of a med spa to get a BBL. Okay. So for those that are coming in, that's what we're watching. We're on the tail end of it. We've been here for about almost 3 hours, and I do have an update on what's going on. So I'll let you guys know where the jury stands. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day, but let's go back in.
Doesn't matter because it wasn't, and she didn't know that. And she didn't know that it would continue to run. Mr. Wakeman also argued that count 1 is going to turn on how you apply the law. Ladies and gentlemen, although counts have been exceeded, every single count turns on how you apply the law. And it turns on how you apply the facts to that law. And in this case, when you apply the facts, when you apply everything the defendant did and did not do on June 29th, 2025, When you apply her statements to detectives on June 29th, 2025 and July 3rd, 2025, you apply those facts to the law, elements 3 and 4 of implied malice, you only have one option at the end of the day. And that option is that the defendant committed second-degree murder. Involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, those fall under that. But the defendant knew what she was doing. She knew before she did it. She knew the dangers, and she acted anyway. Then there was the comment, if the air conditioner worked for law enforcement days later, then it worked for Maya. Nobody has come into this courtroom and challenged whether or not the air conditioning unit worked for one day or not another day. The challenge is, was it on? The challenge is, did she know it would stay on? And she did not. The challenge is, with and without that information, did she know there were risks? With those risks in mind, did she act anyway? And that answer is yes. And we heard some challenges to the recreation and the efforts done by law enforcement. Mr. Wakeman argued that the recreation wasn't done under the same conditions from June 29th, 2025. You know what those missing conditions that Mr. Wakeman was talking about were, ladies and gentlemen? Human beings inside of the vehicle. He's challenging the nature of the recreation because law enforcement did not take children or other humans and put them in the vehicle. He's challenging the recreation because law enforcement did not commit murder that day.
Objection, Your Honor. That's an improper argument.
She fucking you up. I know
You heard from Detective Bartholomew that he talked to his supervisors. They
Your
considered
ass.
perhaps putting a fetal pig in the vehicle. They were told not to because those conditions were not even fair to a fetal pig, just like they were not fair to humans, just like they were not conducive to human life, which is why Amillio died under those conditions. And then defense argued that you must separate facts from emotion. That's absolutely accurate, ladies and gentlemen, which is why you also have to separate the emotion that you saw from the defendant when she testified yesterday. She does not get extra points for testifying. She does not get extra points for being emotional when she talked about her children. Just as you must separate the emotion of the people's witnesses, you must also do so of the defense witnesses, and that now includes the defendant in this case. I quote, she did everything right as soon as she could. First of all, no, she didn't. She did not do everything right as soon as she could. Had she done everything right as soon as she could, we're not here today. Had she done everything right as soon as she could, she would have brought the children inside with her.
See?
Had she done everything right as soon as she could, she would have.
This is exactly that's exactly what I did with y'all 10 minutes ago. Remember, I focused on that sentence and I said, if she did everything right, and then I went through everything that he put above. She's doing, she's lit. Okay, this lawyer, okay, this prosecutor's pretty lit.
At least been checking on her children. The fact that she called 911 6 minutes after she found Amillio, the fact that she did CPR when they guided her, the fact that she allowed him to go to the hospital and wanted to ride with him, that is not doing everything right as soon as she could. That's trying to fix a mess she made. You do not get to shoot somebody in the chest, regret that decision, drive them to the hospital, and then say, well, I'm not guilty. I did everything right as soon as I could.
I object. That's a different mental state.
Shut up.
Mental state. You may continue with your argument about the case.
You do not get to claim because you did everything right as soon as you thought you could that you are not guilty. That is not the standard, ladies and gentlemen. And again, she did not do anything right at any point. She does not get credit for calling 911 when she realized that the danger that she thought could occur actually occurred. And then we have the mitigated risk. Defense argued in their closing argument that Maya mitigated the risk. She mitigated the risk by leaving the key fob in the car and leaving the air conditioner running as she indicated. Ladies and gentlemen, mitigating the risk does not accomplish what the defense thought it was going to accomplish. Mitigating the risk, the defendant taking actions to mitigate a risk, tells you that she knew there were risks to begin with. She knew the risks of leaving the children in the car. She knew the dangers of leaving the children in the car. She showed you that by the attempts she stated she made to mitigate those risks. And knowing those risks, she acted anyway. Knowing those risks, she decided to leave the children in the car. Again, she does not get extra points for mitigating risks that she knew ahead of time and that she acted on anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, everything the defense asked you to rely on today is based upon statements that the defendant made, that she left the air conditioner on, that she left her keys in the car. You must also look at the actual evidence. Look at what she didn't do. She did not check on her children. She did not tell anybody her children were with her. Consider the fact that yesterday you heard a lot of testimony from her about not knowing the risks, misunderstanding the detectives and not knowing they were talking about what she knew beforehand. You didn't hear any of that today. Consider my arguments from this morning where I highlighted the circumstances under which she testified here to not knowing things and when she interviewed with law enforcement officers. Consider all of her actions. Consider what she knew before, what she knew during, and what she knew after. Consider how she behaved inside of that salon while her children were roasting in the car. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard a lot throughout this trial about the burden of proof. That burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. It is the highest burden in the law. It is a burden that is met every day in criminal courts, and it is a burden that has been met in this courtroom in this trial. It is a burden that has been proven, the charge 1, second-degree murder, has been proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to ask you to go into that deliberation room, consider the facts, consider the law, return the only just verdict in this case, return the only verdict supported by the law and the evidence, return the verdict that is going to hold the defendant accountable for her actions, and that is a verdict of guilty to second-degree murder. Thank you for your time.
I mean, she did her thing. She did her thing. Now, the only thing the jury has to grapple with is count 1, right? Do they give her second-degree murder, or do they come down to what she admitted to, which was involuntary manslaughter and child negligence, right? Here is your latest, because we'll see what the judge has to say. But after this was done, the jury did deliberate for almost 2 hours, and the judge has sent them home. All right, the judge sent them home. It is going to continue tomorrow, but let's see what the judge says here before the day ends.
Thank you, Mr. Coney, Mr. Wickman. For the jury, when you go to the jury room, the first thing you should do is to choose a foreperson. The foreperson should see to it that your discussions are carried on in an organized way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. It is your duty to talk with one another and to deliberate in the jury room. You should try to agree on a verdict if you can. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but only after you've discussed the evidence with the other jurors. Do not hesitate to change your mind if you become convinced that you are wrong, but do not change your mind just because other jurors disagree with you. Keep an open mind and openly exchange your thoughts and ideas about this case. Stating your opinions too strongly at the beginning or immediately announcing how you plan to vote may interfere with an open discussion. Treat one another courteously. Your role is to be an impartial judge of the facts, not to act as an advocate for one side or the other. As I told you multiple times during the case, do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in the case with anyone, including but not limited to your spouse, significant other, family, friends, spiritual leaders, advisors, or therapists. You as a juror must discuss the case only in the jury room and only when all 12 jurors are present. Do not discuss your deliberations with anyone and do not communicate using anything other than there's some pre-approved forms for you to send your notes on, so you communicate with that. It's very important that you do not use the internet, the dictionary, or anything else in any way in connection with this case during your deliberations. There were a number of items received into evidence. You're going to get all those back. You don't have to ask for them, so we'll send that all back. We also have the, if it's a DVD player or CD player, I kind of get confused, but you get one that will play everything. You run into any difficulties operating any equipment, just let our bailiff know and we'll help you.
Wow.
If you need to communicate with me while you're deliberating, send a note through the bailiff, either signed by the foreperson or one or more other members of the jury. To have a complete record of the trial, it's important that you do not communicate with me except by a written note. If I have questions, I will talk to the attorneys before I answer, and I will respond to all your questions. It may take a little bit of time for me to talk to the attorneys first. I'll answer all your questions. I'll either bring you here in open court and orally provide an answer, or I'll send a note back with an answer to you. Do not reveal to me or anyone else how the vote stands on the question of guilt or issues in this case Unless I ask you to do so, remember your verdict on each count and any special finding must be unanimous. This means that to return a verdict, all 12 must agree to it. Do not reach a decision by the flip of a coin or by any similar act. As you know, you're the judges of the facts of the evidence. It's not my role to tell you what your verdict should be. Do not take anything I've said or done during the trial as an indication of what you think I think about the facts, the witnesses, or what your verdict should be. You must reach your verdict without any consideration of punishment. You'll be given the verdict forms as soon as all jurors have agreed on a verdict. The foreperson must date and sign the appropriate verdict form and notify the bailiff. If you are able to reach a unanimous decision on only one or some of the charges, fill in that portion. Only notify the bailiff, return any unsigned verdict form. We're going to swear Deputy Reisenhower to take charge of the 12. Once you get in there, you're going to make sure you put your cell phones in your blue envelopes that correspond to your seat number. He'll collect the envelopes, as I mentioned, keep them in a box handy for you outside of the jury room. Take your notes with you. Anything else that you brought with you today, take it with you. There's plenty of water back there, so don't worry about that. So let's swear Deputy Reisenhower.
Do you solemnly swear that you will take charge of the jury and keep them together, that you will not speak to them nor allow anyone else to speak to them upon any subject connected with this case, except by order of the court, and when they have agreed upon a verdict, you will return them into court, so help you God?
For our two alternates, just stay for now. Okay.
All right, so the jury's going back to deliberate. That was 2 hours ago.
We'll have to turn the camera off now.
All right, so they did not reach a verdict today. I'm very surprised. Very, very surprised. We'll go ahead and close that down. But let me bring you guys up to speed on what happens next. As of 28 minutes ago, the jury has been sent home for the day. They're going to return tomorrow at 9 a.m. So coming to our poll, let's see who won. So how long will the jury deliberate? Less than an hour was my vote. 24%. We lost that one. Poor us. Next, 27% came in at 1 hour, also lost. More than an hour was correct at 35% because they were deliberating for 2 hours. And then more than a day, you guys are the super sleuths and the winners because they're coming back tomorrow at 14%. Tomorrow is a crazy day, chat. She did take the stand. She did take the stand. The reason why this judge, Rescue Randy, okay, looking very mannequin-like half of the time. Rescue Randy judge did not allow for cameras in the courtroom aside from opening arguments and closing arguments. So that's why we were not able to see the trial, but I'll give you guys some highlights. It was a 6-day trial for this one. Let me see what they say. Day 6 was today. So now that they've done the closings, juries and deliberation, we'll get an answer likely tomorrow. I don't see this going past tomorrow. Maya, if you don't know, is being charged with the death of her 1-year-old son. She left him and her 2-year-old son in the car for hours in late June while she received a cosmetic procedure. See, the news keeps saying cosmetic procedure. I'm going to just tell you how I see it. It was a BBL. Sis was getting a BBL at 20 years old, with 2 kids at 20 years old. Looks like the dad was involved in these children's lives because that did come up in today's proceedings. Not in this news article, but I'm just letting you guys know. The 2-year-old did survive. The 1-year-old, unfortunately, did not. The local news has been blogging the proceedings. That's how I'm keeping track of it. It looks like it's Bakersfield, California, beginning December 9th. So this started last week. Jurors heard from a bunch of people from the med spa where Hernandez received her treatment, police who responded to the scene, and Hernandez herself. So for those that were asking, she did take the stand. The 20-year-old testified she left her children strapped in their car seats with food and bottles of milk. We now learn it wasn't just bottles of milk. So each baby had a bottle of milk. She left these kids that probably don't know how to open a package of fruit roll-ups, a package of fruit roll-ups as well, as she went to get this BBL procedure done. She said the car was on and the air conditioning was running. Police, however, learned that her vehicle model, a Toyota Corolla hybrid, turns off after an hour if no action is taken. Hernandez said she didn't know that, and she also left the key fob under the seat. Prosecutor Stephanie Tacconi has said that Hernandez knew leaving the kids alone was dangerous, but did so anyway. She's asking the jury to find her guilty on second degree. So that's what the state wants. Hernandez's attorney, Assistant Public Defender Tyrell Wakeman, said his client made a terrible mistake but never intended to harm her children. He has conceded the other charges, involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, but argued Hernandez should be acquitted of the murder charge. And then again, as of 32 minutes ago, the jury is going home for the day. They'll return tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a little tricky because we got a lot going on. Number one, Fonnie Willis is allegedly showing up to this Georgia Senate hearing. That is my priority for the day. That's scheduled for 10 o'clock. After this stream, I'm going to go ahead and create a stream for that. So you guys have it overnight. We're going to start tomorrow at 10. I'm still going to keep my eye on this BBL thing because the other big case, you all remember the I'm a PhD trial?
I'm a PhD.
Latasha is about to be sentenced tomorrow too. So we got three things kind of going on at the same time. I think what I could do is start a stream, focus on Fonnie, because that shouldn't be long. That will probably be about an hour or 2 hours. She's meeting with the Georgia Senate committee, but they really can't do much to her. They're really inquiring on the situation with her, Nathan Wade, finances in her office, whistleblowers that have spoken up about the abuse of finances in her office. They are going to talk a little bit about the trumped up RICO charges and that. So that's going to be a big one. But that is the headline for tomorrow. So I am going to focus on that one. If we have time, we'll probably just shift gears quickly over to Latasha because I have time in with that one with y'all. And then BBL mom, I'm going to kind of put that as a third priority since this case is newer to us, right? Tonight, I'm likely going to put The Reckoning 3 out. So my team has finished that. I just need to approve it. We'll likely put that one out tonight. If not, then it could wait a little bit. Thursday, Courtney Clenny has her final pretrial hearing, and that one's big because there is a motion to dismiss her case still on the table and a motion to reconsider bond still on the table. If you don't know Courtney Clenny, she's the white girl that threw the knife across the room, and she's the OnlyFans model, let me say that, that killed her Black boyfriend. It's a pretty tough case. It's very popular. It's in Miami right now, and we'll see what happens. She has been sitting in jail since 2022. So we've really been highly anticipating this trial. It was scheduled to begin on December 5th, but because of some delays with motions, and December 5th did happen. They did have a hearing. I was supposed to go live on it, but Law and Crime ended up putting the footage up at like 9 o'clock. All y'all were in bed on a Friday. So I was just like, all right, we'll wait to the December 18th hearing. Hopefully they stream that one in time. The other thing that we're doing, other big news, YNW Melly, okay? His first trial ended up in a mistrial. I need to catch up. So during the holidays, I will be watching the YNW Melly first trial. So if you want to catch up with me, you did not catch it, now is your time. His second trial, because that ended in a mistrial, his second trial went up on appeal and is scheduled for January 2027. Now here's the plot twist, chat. While he was in jail, there was some witness tampering going on where like notes were being passed down the hallways in the jail. So other people got implicated in Melly and this other case with witness tampering. That we're ready to go to trial. A date has been set of January 21st. So I need to catch us all up with everything Melly related before we get to that case, because that will be televised. Everybody else is asking me about Dirk. Dirk, I'm going to try to do at the start of January, like more videos on that for y'all that are not familiar with the Dirk situation. Dirk is going to be tricky because that is federal and it is not going to be televised. All right. So we've got some stuff going on. Brian Walsh, yes, was found guilty yesterday of murder. I kind of knew that that was going to happen, so I didn't really follow it too much. But other than that, it is a very busy holiday season. You know, I kind of got a little bit derailed with the 50 Cent Diddy thing with the reckoning. We're on episode 3, so we're almost done. I have my notes already done. We just need to record episode 4 and we're all set. But what we're doing is if anything new happens with the news with 50 Cent and Diddy, I am including that in these episodes. So you get a much more comprehensive view of not only did we look at each episode from a legal standpoint, we're also looking at it to make sure that we include new stuff throughout the week. So for example, today, 50 Cent was talking about, I didn't even know Fabulous and them had, Fab and Jim Jones had a new podcast. I think it's called Let's Rap About It. And Mano is in there. And there's some other guy I'd never seen before. But the 4 of them had a podcast and they were talking about the Diddy situation with 50. And they were like, is it even legal to do a documentary like that? I was like, when people say, is it legal? I'm like, oh, what's happening here? 50 Cent reposted that, went back to Drink Champs and found that footage of Diddy saying, scrambling and scraping. I love it when you're scrambling and scraping, daddy. He was talking about that. So I saw the day start to escalate with that. And then 50 Cent mid-afternoon, probably like 3-4 hours ago, says that he heard that where they do their podcast, the Let's Rap About It, that they haven't paid their lease and it's like $200,000. And he was calling them squatters. And he said, you know what? I'm going to buy your building and 50% of your podcast. So it's heating up. It's heating up and it's heating up. So it is a very busy week. I want to thank everybody that hung out with me today. Not many super chats or things like that, but I'll read them real quick. Shout out to D who hit me with the 2, says vanity is a hell of a drug. Yes, it is. This girl prioritized BBL over family. And it really makes you think a little bit differently, right? Lucretia has been with me for 17 months. I love these. And I love seeing like how long you have been rocking with my community. I really appreciate that, Lucretia. She says, hey, AV, got my AV True Crime shirt on today. Yeah, y'all have been letting me know. Like, I've got to put that new merch up. Matter of fact, I'll do that after this. I have, I already picked everything out. I might not put up Christmas wrapping paper because it's too late. Y'all won't get in time. But I have taken a lot of things in account when y'all talk about merch. I'm launching a champion line, meaning champion hoodies, champion sweatshirts, champion tie-dye hoodies for the ladies, champion long sleeve shirts, and champion t-shirts. All right. Hopefully I could get those up tonight, but we are doing champion merch. All right. Shout out to me. Okay. All right. I'm hooking y'all up. I like quality. For the people that do have the merch that I have posted on av27power.com, that is merch that I have tested and washed and made sure that I like it before I recommend it to you guys. Y'all know Champ is a good line. There's a lot of men and women here because like our dichotomy is mixed. I want to make sure that everybody has a good experience. So we're doing a Champ line. Everything's selected. I just got to put the stuff on it. So all of the things, all the jokes that we have, I'm thinking of everything we've come up with all year. And now that the products are selected, we can now put the designs together and have that up for y'all. So 50% off all month. What is the quote? Get it up. Shout out to Jeremy. That's still up. Took a look at Alicia's case file, nothing new yet. And then same thing with Courtney Clenny. I'm likely going to see something tomorrow, so I'll keep y'all posted. Yeah, everything that you could do to support the channel is in the description box. If you have any tips for me and my team, what we're doing now is if there's cases you want us to cover, somebody actually filled out that form today. And that's how we got to this BBL trial, is that's how you can alert us that there's something really important happening legally, or if there are true crime stories you want us to cover, we'll jump on it but that e-form is in the description box as well. So I think I got everything. Merch coming, we got that. Working on the app or Patreon. We're going to figure it all out. But I love you guys. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Get it up for 50%. That's it. That's it, YT. Get it up. All one word. Get it up. Everything is 50% off. I mean, even when we put the new stuff up, Champ is a little bit more expensive, but I want to make sure you guys get a good deal for the holidays, even if that means gift cards, if people around you like watching the channel, things like that, those will be available too. So y'all have a wonderful night, okay? We will see you tomorrow. Stay safe out there. See you on the next one. Bye.